Okay, we ready to go? Good. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the July 27, 2021 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. The first order of business is Bills and Communications, the meeting minutes from July 13, 2021. Can I have a motion on that?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis, second by Commissioner Noonan. Thank you, Francis and Noonan.
Mr. Chair, if you could just, on the record, have Commissioner Elliott sit for Commissioner Braun.
I do this every time, don't I? I get it all squared away before we start, and then I forget to announce it. So we have Commissioner Elliott sitting in for Commissioner Braun is here live and
Oh, she is. Okay, good.
High fidelity. Excellent. Very good. So we have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Francis, second by Commissioner Noonan. Commissioner Francis, any comments on the minutes? No. Very good. No. I didn't see anything else either. Commissioner Noonan, good. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments about the minutes? Yes, Commissioner Braven.
I have no problem with the minutes. I should abstain from the vote. I should abstain from the vote because I was late.
All right, very good. We'll have one abstention. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? And I have your abstention, Commissioner Braman. Very good. The minutes are adopted unanimously with one abstention. Next are new applications to recommend a public hearing. 73 Thorpe Street, special permit application of Bet Gigliotti Green pertaining to the construction of a 2-unit residential building in the Center Design District.
Having a little trouble hearing you there, Matt.
Sorry. Thank you for telling me, apropos of our technology issues tonight. New applications to recommend a public hearing. 73 Thorpe Street, special permit application of Bet Gigliotti Green pertaining to the construction of a 2-unit residential building in the Center Design District. Mr. Went?
I don't have anything to add to that, Mr. Chairman.
Move to public hearing.
Okay, motion to move to public hearing by Commissioner Noonan, second by?
I will second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Francis, seconded by Commissioner Francis. It's a special permit, so it requires a public hearing. So we really don't need any more information than that. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimous. The next is 801 Post Road, special permit application of Samuel Gardner, architect, pertaining to additions and alterations to establish a restaurant use in the design commercial district.
You may recall this application was for Pizza Co. on the corner of Post and South Benson, was withdrawn. The application has been revised and it's back in for a special permit and does require a public hearing.
Excellent, thank you. Motion to move to public hearing, Commissioner Noonan, and seconded by Commissioner Braman. Excellent. Anyone else have any questions or comments on that? Good. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let's move to public hearing unit. Next item is old business, 1073 North Benson Road. Special exception application of Fairfield University pertaining to the conversion of a former student infirmary to student housing within an existing building in the AA zone.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this application was heard at our last meeting. Fairfield University recently completed the construction of a new student wellness center in the quad dorm area, which is attached to Joe's Residence Hall. The university is now seeking to utilize the space in Dolan Hall that housed that former student infirmary for 22 additional beds of student housing. This existing building is already utilized as a student residence hall, and the proposed conversion of space is solely interior to the building. The relevant standards of consideration for a special exception are, number one, is the location, type, character, and size and use of the buildings in harmony with, and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood. Two, is the nature and location of the use in buildings or structures such that there will be adequate access for fire protection. 3, are the streets serving the proposed use adequate to carry prospective traffic? And 4, is the proposed use in compliance with the plan of conservation and development? That is all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless there are any questions.
Great, thank you. Could I have a motion on this item? Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis?
Move to approve.
Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Noonan. Thank you, Commissioner Noonan. Commissioner Francis, any comments? I'm sorry, your audio is actually cutting in and out.
Okay. I support this because it complies with all our standards.
Want to chat? Hit the chat. My goodness. You cut out, and now we're hearing somebody else's conversation. With apologies, Commissioner Francis. We can't hear you. I'm sorry. I see your lips. Now, go ahead.
I support this because it complies with our 4 criteria special permit.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Noonan?
Just simply, it strikes me as a de minimis change in that respect, meets our standards or doesn't affect the standards, but I would support it.
Very good. Anyone else have any other comments? I agree. I mean, when you think about this in consideration of the criteria, there's adequate fire access. The building's been, there's no change to the building itself. It's safe. There's no impact to the roads carrying the traffic and so forth. So meets all our criteria. You know, it's an appropriate use of the space for the university. So I agree. We should support this. Anyone else have any other comments or questions? Okay, the motion is to approve. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the special exception application is approved unanimously. The next item is 1143 Sasco Hill Road, subdivision and coastal site plan application of 1143 Sasco Hill Road LLC for 7 lots in a AAA zone.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the subject parcel is a 20-acre lot and proposed to be subdivided into 7 lots. The existing estate property contains an existing main dwelling, 3 guest houses, and a boathouse. A private road with a 30-foot right-of-way is proposed to service the interior lots. The 2 lots that front on Sasco Hill Road have existing driveways. The private road is proposed in the location of the existing main driveway access to the site utilizing the same curb cut. The road is proposed to have a paved width of 20 feet with a 40-foot paved radius turnaround. Section 2.1.1.4 of the subdivision regulations permits the consideration of private roads in the 1 and 2 acre zones. And the subdivision regulations, and they further state that the commission may classify a street as a private street where conditions of the land to be subdivided in the adjoining neighborhood would make a private street especially appropriate, and where the proposed street will provide only the same traffic service as a local street and will not be an essential link in a safe system of traffic circulation in the surrounding area. The plan includes the dedication of a strip of land along Sasco Hill Road to widen the existing right-of-way to the required 50 feet pursuant to section 2.1.10 of the subdivision regulations. No physical widening of the street pavement is proposed. There is an existing stone wall parallel to the pavement, which would need to be removed to accomplish any road widening. We do have a report from the engineering department that recommends accepting the dedication strip that would allow for widening in the future, should it be deemed necessary. However, the town has no present plans to widen Sasco Hill Road. There is an existing 6-acre private conservation restriction along the shorefront in favor of Aztec Land Trust. The applicant and the land trust have negotiated additional restrictions that would prohibit structures within this restricted area. To comply with the open space provision of the subdivision regulations, a 2.01 acre area within the restricted area is proposed to be dedicated as private open space to be owned by an association of property owners. This 2.01 acres would be exclusive of any of the individual lots. On April 27th of this year, after a public hearing, the commission made a preliminary recommendation that this proposed private open space would be appropriate for this proposal. The Aspetuck Land Trust and Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association support this proposal. This plan was also referred to the Connecticut DEEP, and you received comments the day of the last hearing with regard to the coastal site plan application. Those comments recognize the unique conservation restriction along the shorefront and recommends conditions of approval should the commission determine that the need to protect coastal habitat on site outweighs the need to provide public access through this property. And those conditions would include, number one, no additional docks or other structures be allowed in the entire conservation area outside of Lot 4. And number two, no fences, walls, or other obstructions are permitted that would obstruct public access below the mean high water line from adjacent properties. At the hearing, the applicant agreed to accept these conditions if approved. The Aspetuck Land Trust, again, was present at the hearing to support the proposed enhanced coastal habitat plan as it is proposed. The review of a subdivision is administrative to determine whether the proposed lots meet the zoning requirements. The discretionary elements of this proposal include several things. Firstly, whether or not a private road is appropriate for the proposed development pursuant to section 2.1.1.4 of the regulations. Number two, whether the proposed private open space satisfies the open space provisions of section 2.3 of the zoning regulations, subdivision regulations. Third, whether the proposed road widening dedication satisfies section 2.1.10 of the subdivision regulations. And finally, whether the plan is consistent with the coastal management policies as proposed, subject to the potential conditions as noted. That is all I have at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for the summary and the points of decision. Could I have a motion on this one? Yeah, Commissioner Brayman.
Move to approve with the conditions as stated by staff.
Excellent. So that would mean that the two questions at the end of whether the private road is appropriate and meets the conditions of is appropriate under section 2.1.4, that would be in the affirmative that it is appropriate. Yes. Okay, and whether the open space satisfies the requirements of section 2.3, that would also be in the affirmative. And correct. The dedication of the road widening is appropriate with no physical development, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a second? Yep. Commissioner Levy, second the motion.
I second, and also I'd also make reference to the DEP conditions regarding docks and so forth.
Agreed. Those were subsumed as affirmative conditions of approval, I think, in the motion. But thank you for pointing that out. So I agree that the motion includes those conditions of approval as well. Excellent. Commissioner Brayman, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, obviously, this is a very important and valuable piece of property in town, both because of its size and where it's situated, its value, and its value to the environment and the coastal resources. I think that the applicant and the neighbors and the Aspetuck Land Trust, who testified before us, will capture those aspects of it. I would approve the subdivision because it complies with our subdivision regulations. And with respect to the discretionary elements, I think, number one, the applicant satisfied me that the road that would be created as part of the subdivision could permissibly be a private road as opposed to a public street under our subdivision regulations, and that, in fact, the neighborhood and the community would prefer that it be private. With respect to the dedication of the space that might be needed in the future for the widening of Sasko Hill Road, was satisfied by Ms. Pooley's recommendation that the dedication was sufficient and that there's no need to actually widen the road at this time, and it would be counterproductive. With respect to the open space, I think, we gave sufficient and significant consideration to the preliminary recommendation that we gave, that was acceptable, and the Aspetuck Land Trust and the neighbors were in favor of that as well. And with respect to the coastal site plan application and the conditions, I think, with the conditions as stated by DEEP that the applicant has agreed to, I think that the CAM Act is satisfied. I don't know if there's anything else that we need to address, but I'm happy to discuss anything else.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Levy, anything to add? You're on mute.
I have one question perhaps staff could help me with. Are there any existing docks pertinent to Lot 4?
There was a dock, there's the remnants of a dock, I believe, on Lot 4, and I think the plan going forward is they may pursue a dock on Lot 4, but if such a dock were to happen, and that's why DEP recognizes that outside the boundary of Lot 4, it would have to be designed such that it would not interfere with the access that the public has presently below the mean high tide line.
So that would be subject to further review, either as to the nature of the dock or how many docks?
We're suggesting that it be a single dock only on Lot 4, nothing outside of Lot 4, and that would be subject to a DEEP permit.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps we could have a friendly amendment to limit the condition to it being one dock and subject to DEP approval of that future dock.
Okay, excellent suggestion, Commissioner Brayman.
No objection to the amendment. I incorporated into the motion, or I move to amend my motion to incorporate that additional statement.
You got it. It's no need for a motion. You're amended, so long as Commissioner Levy, you agree?
I agree.
Yeah.
And then in terms of my thoughts about it, while often I would want public access, I think the unique environmental aspects of the area subject to the land trust are such that preserving it as a private land trust is appropriate considering the environmental factors. In addition, the proposed agreement with the Aspetuck Land Trust actually limits and precludes over further development such as helicopter landing pads and so forth. So it does provide actually additional protection for that area. And in terms of the private road, I think that's certainly preferable to a 50-foot road in that area. So basically, all things being said, I think this is an appropriate development which respects and gives protection to this unique area, and particularly the environmental aspects.
Excellent, thank you. Any other commissioners have anything to add, questions or comments? I think that Commissioner Brayman and Commissioner Levy have done an excellent job of summarizing the views of the commission here. Thank you very much. So I think that's all well articulated. Anyone else? Any comments? The motion is to approve with all the conditions and bells and whistles as stated. Are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? No. So that is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is zoning compliances. 1262 Post Road, zoning compliance application of LJG 1262 Post Road, Fairfield LLC, to establish a medical office use in an existing building in the Center Design District.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this subject parcel is the former Fairfield Post Office site. which in 2013 was converted to a restaurant use and housed Plan B burgers with a separate retail use in the rear. At the time of those approvals, the Zoning Board of Appeals variance was approved to allow 59 spaces in lieu of 73 spaces for the uses on that site. Both the retail use and the restaurant have left the site and the building is presently vacant. Hartford Healthcare seeks to establish medical office use in the entire building. The components to the occupancy are detailed in the letter of intent that was submitted. This change in use from retail to medical increases the parking demand from the previous 73 spaces to 75 spaces. And recently, the ZBA granted a subsequent variance to permit those same 59 spaces to satisfy the 75 spaces in consideration of the fact that the applicant has acquired 16 employee parking permits from the town for nearby off-site employee parking. No exterior changes are proposed for the building, and it's a change of use from formerly restaurant and retail to medical office. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So may I have a motion on this item? Commissioner Francis, it looks like you're trying to say something. Are you moving to approve? I can't hear you. I apologize.
I will move to approve, yes.
Okay, very good. Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis and second by Commissioner Noonan. Give me a thumbs up if I have that correctly. No, he's telling me to hold on a moment. Can't hear you, Commissioner Noonan.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just realized I have to recuse myself from this.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Sorry.
So we have a recusal for Commissioner Noonan, which means that Commissioner Elliott. Thumbs up. You are sitting in for Commissioner Noonan. Thanks very much. All right. So we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Francis. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Brayman. Thank you. So Commissioner Francis appears to have moved away from her computer from there she is. If you have anything you'd like to lead us off with, it's your motion.
I find this will be an excellent use for the space. Oh, wait a minute. You can't
I can. Check. Yes.
and it's right across from another major medical building, so that would be helpful too to the clients, I would think. And it meets our criteria for special permits, so I would support it.
Very good. Commissioner Brayman?
The change in use appears to meet our regulations, and in addition, I think that the use is suitable for the site. Although we will miss Plan B, I think that Hartford Healthcare will be a good addition to this site.
Right. Yeah. I like Plan B. I was sorry to see that one go. It was and also an interesting use of the old post office. And not that this won't be, but it's a medical building and a brick building. So, other commissioners have any comments or questions? This complies with our regulations and it is a zoning compliance application. Motion is to approve. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Very good. I see hands. Any opposed? None. And we have, Commissioner Noonan is recused. He's not abstaining. So the compliance application is approved unanimously. Thank you. The next items on the agenda are the public hearing. Members of the public that have joined us, thank you. Public hearings are the applicant goes first with all of their witnesses and exhibits and evidence and such. Then I will call for public comments. We have received some things via email. You can sign up in the chat box and we'll call you in order of your signing up. But I will also make a general call for members of the public to be heard at that time as well. So even if you don't sign up, you'll still have an opportunity to speak. After the members of the public finish, then the applicant has a rebuttal. And once the applicant is finished with the rebuttal, they get the final word, and the public hearing on that item is closed. And so the first item on our agenda is 323 Old Dam Road, the special exception and coastal site plan application of Esplanade LLC pertaining to the construction of a single-family dwelling in the floodplain district. This was continued from our meeting and last hearing on July 13th, 2021. We had the applicant complete their presentation. We heard from a couple of members of the public and a request for a continuance for Attorney Green to represent some neighbors. He was on vacation. The applicant gracefully consented to an adjournment of that hearing and an extension of time. Thank you. And so with that, I would call on Attorney Green to come up with his comments and arguments, and then he completes his presentation. We'll ask for anyone else who is not represented by Attorney Green if they wish to be heard, and then we'll turn it back to the applicant. So with that, Attorney Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, thank you. For the record, my name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. It's my pleasure to appear before you tonight on behalf of a number of residents of Old Dam Road, including Christine Taylor, Sarah Falcos, Michael and Kristen Ginley, and Michael and Diane Wagner, who are each residents in the immediate vicinity of the proposed development. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your courtesy. I appreciate your continuing this matter and the cooperation of the applicant. And this is an important application to my clients, and I look forward to sharing a number of issues which they've raised. The first thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that you've received a petition today through one of my clients, and that should be in the record, and I just want to be sure it is. And it's a petition signed by approximately 20 households, all in the vicinity of the proposed development. Is that confirmed and in the record at this time?
Confirmed. We received it by email. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And you know, the opposition to this, this is a matter of great importance to the residents of Old Dam Road. It presents a dramatic change to this property. Obviously, it's a vacant piece of property. The proposed development would result in a structure that's very tall in terms of its proximity to the road. It is close to the road. It is nearly 40 feet high. It'll obviously significantly change the character of the neighborhood. My clients and their neighbors believe that it's inconsistent with the master plan. It's inconsistent with the objectives for preservation of the coastal resources. But what I'd like to do is, there are some matters that I think would be of importance to the commission, and I'm not sure that we have to get too deeply into the application, because I think there are some fundamental flaws in the application that would prevent the commission from granting the application. So the first thing is, as you are all aware, 323 Old Dam Road, the subject property, is a vacant parcel of land. There are no homes, there are no structures there. I've looked into it. I wasn't able to find any recorded subdivision map or plan of residential development that affected that property ever. And I'll get into the significance of that in a moment. In my research, I determined that there were several homes built in that area in the early part of the 1900 through about 1930. There were homes built in that area. And at one time, in fact, there was a home built on the subject property. It's shown outlined on the site plan although I'm really not quite sure why, because it was destroyed over 25 years ago. There was no effort to maintain it or to maintain the presence of a residential structure. There was no effort to rebuild the structure. And interestingly, and the reason I had provided you yesterday with the excerpt from Judge Radcliffe's decision is that there is specifically a finding by Judge Radcliffe that the residential use on the property was abandoned long ago. And he makes reference to, I think at the time, that over 20 years before that, it had been abandoned. And so he made a finding as part of that decision that there is no legally existing or non-conforming use of any kind on the property, and that any former use of the property was abandoned. So the importance of that for the purpose of this commission is that we are starting basically with a clean slate, with a blank canvas with this property. And it is basically a parcel that sits in the floodplain district and partially in the beach district. And as you are aware, in the floodplain district, residential uses are not permitted as of right. And in fact, you must apply for a special exception, as the applicant has done here, to allow residential use. But the regulation, which I've specifically put into the record, specifically requires that as part of that special exception, you have to prove that the property complies with all of the requirements in the R2 zone. And specifically, and it says specifically in section 23.7, says the floodplain district regulations with respect to lot area and shape, access, setbacks, height, coverage, bulk minimum floor area for dwellings, off-street parking, and loading and signs are the same as the regulations provided for the same matters in the R2 district. And section 5 of the zoning regulations is hereby incorporated into these regulations. So basically, while you have to meet the special exception standards, to even get there, you have to meet the R2 standards. Today, Attorney Fallon had sent an email in, and I hope you've all had an opportunity to see it, because among the exhibits that was of interest to me and I hadn't looked at in some time, were that there were certain variances granted with respect to the proposed development of the property. And that's in the record. And it that approval provided that the lot coverage, the maximum lot coverage requirement had been waived or had been varied by the Zoning Board of Appeals. The street line setback had been varied by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the minimum ground floor area had been varied pursuant to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, I question the validity of those variances at this time because conditions have changed on the lot, as Attorney Fallon had highlighted when he presented to you. Some of the conditions and some of the measurements of buildable area on the lot have changed. And it would be my position that many of those variances are specific to the site plan that was presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But I'm stating that for the record, and we don't need to get too deeply into it.
Yeah, so if I could just interrupt you for a moment, Attorney Green, you mentioned that Attorney Fallon sent a letter into the commission today.
That's my understanding. He sent I can follow it up for the commission if you'd like, but he had submitted approximately 5 exhibits.
I have Fallon exhibits. Okay, not a letter. Okay, not a letter, but five exhibits. And it's labeled Exhibit A at the top of the first page on the
Correct.
right hand corner.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we have those. Thank you.
And thank you for clarifying that. And one of the exhibits was in fact the notice of the granting of the variances that I've
I
highlighted.
wanted to be sure that there was nothing that we were missing.
Now, to go one step further, the zoning regulations of 27.1 with respect to special exceptions also indicates that in order to grant a special exception, this commission has to find that the plan complies with all of the other requirements in the zoning regulations. And interestingly, today when I was looking at the materials that Attorney Fallon had provided, I started looking at the site plan that had been submitted, and it raises a question. When I started going through the grid, and perhaps we can call that up, I can do it, or if Ms. Harrigan wants to do it, to call up the site plan, which is page 18 of the application, which is the proposed site plan. Or page 18 is the site plan, is more accurately what I meant to say. There we go. And if we can zoom in on the upper right corner of the site plan of page 18, the grid, the so-called grid, and if the members of the commission have this handy, it's kind of critical to this discussion. So you'll see that the applicant...
Just keep going on the plus, if you would. Thanks.
So you'll note that the applicant makes reference, there we go, to the variances that were granted and with respect to the setback from street line. And you'll note that there's a circle with a number 1 in it, and also the floor area for 2 or more stories. And the variances that were granted are referenced, and they are taken advantage of as part of this application. The thing that I could not find, and what I'm going to ask through you, Mr. Chairman, is I had trouble determining, and if Emmeline, if you can just scroll down just 2 lines, the other way, I'm sorry, scroll up. There you go. Right there. The minimum square on the lot. And it shows that the minimum square must be, you must have a minimum square of 80 feet on the lot. And I note the minimum square, which is set forth in 5.2.5.3 of the regulations. That's where the minimum square is in fact 80 feet. The applicant shows that the actual minimum square that could be accommodated is 138.94 feet. What I'm struggling with is, and I've provided you with the definition of lot area and shape. And that's set forth in 31.2.21. And it says that the area of the minimum square required on each lot shall be exclusive of wetlands, watercourses, conservation easements, or any other restriction other than setbacks which would prevent actual house construction within the square. So you have to create an area on a lot for the minimum square that is 80 feet, and it cannot include wetlands or any other area where you can't have house construction other than setbacks. Now, if Ms. Harrigan, if you can zoom out so we can take a look at the site plan. And it was interesting for me to see the variance this afternoon. And if, I don't know if you can see, maybe I can, how do I enable my cursor to operate on the site plan? Is that, can you share the controls?
You can't. You need to
No.
share your screen in order for your cursor to appear.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is just give me one moment.
Ms. Harrigan has to stop sharing in order for you to share.
Okay, that's fine. If you'll just bear with me for one moment, my computer's going a little slowly here. So let me try this. That work?
It is starting. There it is.
Okay. So what that definition says then is that the minimum square, once again, shall be exclusive of wetlands and watercourses. Now you can see that the applicant shows a wetland line, and specifically there's a wetland boundary, and it says wetland boundary flagged by Tom Petrus, soil scientist, on January 6, 1992. My cursor is on that line. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Hopefully you can.
Yes.
So that is the wetland boundary. Within that, on the property side, is the CJS, which is a coastal jurisdiction line, which is a deep, the deep jurisdiction line, which is at 3.7. And as I understand it, you can't build below the CJL. So either this boundary of the property on what I'm going to call the western boundary of the property is either bound by the wetland line, but I believe it's this deep coastal jurisdiction line. You can't build below that. And then on the east side of the property, you have this dotted line, which is the actual edge of the right-of-way, and it is actually labeled by the applicant as right-of-way line per town record. And I, in fact, provided you with the older map 3306, which shows that this is the line of the right-of-way of Old Dam Road. So that is the true boundary. It's not the paved boundary, but it's the true boundary. There's a pin right here, as my cursor shows, that lines up with a pin on the other drawing. So obviously you can't build within the town right-of-way. So what I'm getting at
is your objection because the square is not feasible given the rights of way and the meets and bounds of the property, or because it's in a floodplain and with wetlands?
It's because you can't fit the 80-foot square within the outside of the wetland. That means to the east of the wetland and to the west of the right-of-way. You cannot accommodate the minimum square. Therefore, the lot does not qualify as a building lot because you can't accommodate does not have adequate shape for a building lot. And that section and that requirement was not one that has been waived, and it is in full force and effect, and it is a requirement in the R2 zone that in order to have a building lot, you have to be able to accommodate the minimum square on the lot.
Yeah, I mean, Judge Radcliffe's decision states 3,200 square feet are available to build upon. That's after a lengthy analysis of, the variances and the hardship and all the rest of it. I'm trying to square Judge Radcliffe's finding that there are 3,200 square feet available to build upon, and the applicant's representation that there is, a buildable square with,
So, well,
with argument.
the applicant shows 135 foot square.
Mhm.
And I think in order so that we don't confuse Judge Radcliffe's decision, we appealed the 3 variances that had been granted, and the applicant did not seek a variance on lot shape. And Judge Radcliffe found, and in my view, improvidently, but with all due respect, found that there was adequate hardship to grant the variances, but the minimum square lot area and shape was not the subject of that case. So that was not a variance, it was not appealed, it was not brought. So therefore it was not the subject of the appeal. So while Judge Radcliffe may have upheld the action by the ZBA never acted on minimum square. And I suppose it might be productive, and so that I don't waste the commission's time through you, I would inquire of the applicant if they can just identify where the minimum square falls on the site.
Well, they can address that in their rebuttal. I'm not going to have you guys go back and forth, during your time. We have a site plan, we have their representations, and that's one of your arguments, and they'll address that on rebuttal.
Fair enough. So it's our position then that the areas of the lot that can be built on, there is not remotely 80 feet. And I have with me Steve Trinkus of Trinkus, anticipating that the commission might have that response. I have Steve Trinkus with me of Trinkus Engineering. He has appeared before the commission, and I'm wondering if Mr. Trinkus, I would call upon him to offer his findings on the minimum square issue.
Very well.
Yes, I'm here, Attorney Green. For the record, Stephen Trinkus, I'm a licensed professional engineer with an office in Southbury. I reviewed the site plan by the applicant and printed it out and made myself an 80 foot by 80 foot square to overlay it. And the square does not fit anywhere on the lot between either the property line and the wetland boundary or the right-of-way line on the property boundary. Based upon the definition of the zoning regulations, I would concur with Attorney Green that it's not a valid lot because it simply cannot accommodate the required minimum square under your zoning regulations.
So the next issue, it relates to the street line. At present, the applicant is proposing with its variance to create a structure that is approximately 17 feet, and they have used the property line as the measurement instead of the street line. It is a street line setback. I've provided you with section 31.2.36, which defines the street line as the right-of-way easement or taking line of any public or private street. And then it has a comma, and then it says, or of any easement of access or private right-of-way 25 feet or more in width. The way I interpret that would be that the street line would be the western boundary of Old Dam Road, and that the house must be set back 17 feet or 16 and change per the variance from the edge of the right-of-way, which I've already highlighted and shown to the commission. I know that Attorney Fallon will point out that he has spoken with Mr. Wendt and others in the zoning department. He believes that it should be measured from the property line because Old Dam Road is less than 25 feet or more in width. He may point to Judge Radcliffe's decision for authority, but I would suggest that the plain wording of street line is the right-of-way easement or taking line of any public or private street. Here we have a public or private street, and then it adds comma, or of any easement of access or private right-of-way 25 feet or more in width. And the way I would interpret that would be that if you have some sort of an easement of access or a private right-of-way, which this is not, but which is 25 feet or more in width, then you must treat that as a street line. And I know Attorney Fallon will will want to discuss that, but I will respectfully disagree, and that's an issue that I want to put in the record, and I urge the commission to review the regulation. The next thing is that the applicant has failed to, in that grid that I showed you, I believe that the applicant has failed to properly calculate the lot area, and therefore all of the calculations in the grid are inaccurate. And the reason I say that is because under 31.2.21 of the regulations, again, calculating lot area and shape, it talks about what goes into determining minimum lot area. And it says no street or highway may be included in the calculation of lot area or shape. But more significantly, the last sentence of 31.2.1 is that land in a, and it says several districts, it says land in a residence, designed residence, beach, or floodplain district shall not be used to satisfy a lot requirement in any other district. And I had Mr. Trinkus review the plan, and as we can show you, the part of this property is in the beach zone, and it's our belief that that was not exempted out by the applicant. And I can show you specifically this whole area of the property, and referring to the southerly portion of the property, is in a beach zone and could not be used to satisfy the lot area. Similarly, the town right-of-way or the highway or the private or public street, no street or highway, private or public here, would count towards the lot area. I had Mr. Trinkus similarly take a look at this, and I think that Mr. Trinkus can confirm that the applicant had failed its calculations to net out the beach zone property, had failed to net out the area of the right-of-way, and that the area of the lot that is available would really be from the deep jurisdiction line, the coastal jurisdiction line on the west. On the south, it would be the floodplain line, floodplain zone boundary line. And to the east, it would be of the right-of-way, which the applicant shows on its plan. And as a result of that error, substantially all of the ratio calculations that the applicant submitted to the commission are incorrect. Mr. Trinkus, if you could, if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman, call upon Mr. Trinkus to confirm his findings on his measurement of the site.
Yes, Steve Trinkus again. What we did was take the applicant's plan and put it into an AutoCAD software program to the proper scale, and then determined the areas, as mentioned by Attorney Green, of, you know, from the coastal jurisdiction line to the right-of-way, and then excluded the area to the south and the right-of-way limit, and you get a much lower land area than what the applicant states. So it would not conform again to the zoning regulations based on what we found reviewing the plan.
So the result then is a smaller lot.
Yeah, a much smaller measured lot.
Right. So does that also mean that the buildable square, that the buildable square would also be, you know, measurably smaller?
No, the buildable square is once again a set dimension that you must fit into your lot. So it's that 80 by 80 square that you have to fit into the lot, and that was adopted by this commission to assure that lots would be of an appropriate shape. So obviously, different districts with different lot sizes have different minimum squares which you must fit. If in fact, if you looked at that 1143 Sasko Hill plan that the commission passed this evening and its subdivision plan, each one of those lots, for example, showed a 200-foot square, so that it assured that you don't get incredibly narrow properties, you know, long or you know, dog bone shaped properties, all kinds of, or you know, hourglass shaped properties. It makes sure that there is at least some place on the lot that it is of an adequate shape. So you have to be able to fit that in. And as I'd indicated earlier, once again, it's exclusive of the highway or the town road. It's exclusive of wetlands and CJL. And that's to be sure that you have this ample buildable area that you can fit on the lot. So that's independent. What this really goes to is that it gives you the denominator in setting coverage and setting building size, and you know, those percentages. The applicant shows for you know, maximum building lot coverage. They show maximum building floor area as a percentage of lot area. It would reduce the denominator of that fraction. And so those calculations that the applicant has submitted are all inaccurate because their calculation of the lot area did not account for those requirements of the regulations.
Okay.
The next, the next issue is that it's our position that the plan is inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development and the shore area management plan. Before I even get to that, and before I leave the regulation, you know, kind of the regulations issues, I would urge the commission to review section 17.4 of the regulations as you consider this application. I mean, those are the standards that this applicant has to, I'm sorry, 27.4. And those are the standards that the applicant must prove. Those are findings that this commission must find in order to approve this application. I can so they're set forth here, and they are obviously that the commission has to make these findings, that these conditions exist, that the location, type, character, and size of use in buildings and structures are in harmony with and conform to the appropriate orderly development of the town and the neighborhood. And they don't hinder or discourage appropriate development or use of property or impair its value. It would be my client's position that by having this tall house, by virtue of it being, meeting flood zone regulations, close to the road, it would be close to their properties. It would impede or impair their value. The applicant really hasn't offered a lot on the other factors in terms of access and location. The landscaping, the commission has to make a finding that it's in conformance with 25.7.6. The commission has to find that it's in conformity with the master plan. So this is a good intro to this portion of my presentation.
Question for you.
Noonan.
Before you get onto the master plan, I want to understand your client's objections. Do they object to a house being built on this property at all?
They do.
Okay, so and that's why I want to understand, because I keep hearing height and things like that. They object completely to a house being built at all on this property.
It's their belief, the applicant has presented a plan with, in our view, very old data. We believe that conditions have changed dramatically. We've all seen that conditions have changed dramatically. I personally believe, I don't want to even get into, we've seen the water is rising. The water is rising. And my clients don't believe that this is an appropriate lot for development. There are uses for this site. Honestly, my clients, we feel that this should be preserved as open space. It's adjacent to other town of Fairfield property, and that it should be preserved undeveloped. But having said that, and I understand I understand how the commission might interpret that they don't want the property to be developed, but I think living down there, you see what happens when there's high tide conditions. You see what's happened in the heavy storms that have occurred. And we have to question whether this is a suitable lot for development for a variety of reasons. But if it is going to be developed, and if this commission is going to find that all of these conditions exist, I mean, ultimately, this plan cannot be granted. But if ultimately this ends up back before this commission sometime, we don't think that those protections that are granted under the floodplain and that really limit development, we don't feel that the conditions for overcoming those restrictions have been met or can be met with respect to this lot, I think is the essential point. So, plan of conservation and development, I would just, there's just a lot in the POCD about the shore area. It is pointed out how densely developed it is. There's a specific finding on page 48 on characteristics of the shore area. And it specifically found when you adopted this that it's dense in that area. It is really dense along the shoreline. And part of the justification in the past for allowing that density is that in my lifetime, that property, it was just summer cottages down there. And many of you can remember it was bungalows and cottages, not the younger folks on the commission, but anyone who's been around for a while. Those were just summer shacks, some of them, in cottages. And now it's year-round occupancy, and it's led to challenges in terms of infrastructure, population density. And you speak specifically in terms of public safety and flooding concerns. And it's interesting, and I know I've used up a lot of oxygen in the room here, or in the Zoom room, but I looked at the subdivision regulations. It's interesting that your subdivision regulations provide that if you want to create a subdivision with a cul-de-sac, you can't have more than 10 lots that have building lots that have sole access on the cul-de-sac. And yet it's interesting that Old Dam Road, which is a narrow road, has dozens, if not 100 homes on it, and it's basically a cul-de-sac. And your concern with the subdivision regulation was to assure access, public safety, and all that kind of thing. And it seems, incongruent to me to be adding more house building lots to Old Dam Road with that, principle in mind. But I'll move on. Page 70 of the POCD under Environment and Ecology talks about directing development away from fragile portions of the land environment, particularly the shore, wetlands, and natural floodplain. And certainly this does not achieve that objective. You speak in 75 Roman numeral 3, 5.2e about coastal floodplains, marshes, and wetlands, all of which provide space for drainage and flood, and if occupied, would endanger man-made structures and human life, increase flood dangers to other areas, or require replacement by high-cost flood control structures. So once again, it's inconsistent with that. 85 is deals with goals for residential, and it speaks of ensuring that the intensity of development does not increase. You speak in terms of along the Pine Creek area to protect coastal resources and reduce the degree of nonconformity and protect coastal uses from flood hazards by reducing, whenever feasible, the potential to damage of life and property. Page 86 under open space speaks about protecting Fairfield's tidal wetlands from further degradation, protect Fairfield's shoreline and inland wetlands from further degradation, continue marsh restoration and reestablish marshlands, to acquire environmentally sensitive and/or significant parcels, to complement existing town-owned open space parcels. Again, this is adjacent to town open space. And you also indicate that the Land Acquisition Commission should consider other coastal sites for acquisition that are contiguous with town-owned parcels. And certainly this would be a great candidate for that. So I think it's hard to find that this, I think in the presentation that the applicant made, they simply said, well, it's residential, so it's consistent because it's in a residential area. But that really ignores so many provisions in the POCD. Let's see, I've talked about the fact that this is a blank, basically a blank slate. So basically, in conclusion, once again, this cannot be granted as a special exception because it doesn't meet that development standard. Specifically the minimum square. So it's not the correct shape for development. I've pointed out we do contest the setback issue. We do contest all of the calculations in the grid and I urge you to ask the applicant on rebuttal, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, please ask where that 135-foot dimension comes from in the grid. Please ask specifically for the boundary lines of the property or the lot area that enables the applicant to claim that there's 9,153.
Speak into your microphone.
What's that?
Please speak in your microphone. You were moving away.
I apologize. That there's 9,153 square feet. And whether that includes the beach zone, which we know it does because, as Attorney Trinkus indicated, we did the calculation. Ask the applicant whether it includes the town right-of-way, which we know it does because we did the calculation. So it doesn't meet the standards of the R2 zone. It's defective. The plan is obviously defective on that basis, and it doesn't meet the standards for the CAM or for the POCD. And we urge the commission to deny the applications. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Do any of the members of the commission have any questions for Attorney Green or Mr. Trinkus? I don't see any hands.
I
Okay,
wanna
good.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and
Great.
attention.
Appreciate that. Ms. Harrigan, do we have any members of the public that signed up to speak on this application?
I don't see anybody who has specifically requested to speak. Nope.
Okay, so I'll make an open call then to any members of the public that are on the call here. Now is your opportunity to be heard on this application if you would like. I don't hear anyone. I don't see anyone raising their hand. So going once, going twice, 3 times. All right, very well. So we will close the public comment portion of the hearing on this, and we will turn now back to Attorney Fallon and the applicant for your rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is John Fallon. I'm representing the applicant with regard to this matter. I think where I would probably want to begin, I will address a few of Mr. Green's comment, but I mean, I think the overriding comment that really needs to be stressed here is that the lot in question here is a pre-existing non-conforming lot. The fact that it's vacant doesn't change that. It's been a lot that's existed for residential purposes well before zoning regulations were adopted. And it had a house on it until 1997. It continues and has for over 60 years been taxed as a tax parcel. So that I think at the very outset, I'll address the concerns that he raises, but we should keep in mind, also he misstates respectfully, and perhaps not intentionally, Judge Radcliffe's comments. Because if you look at page 9 of Judge Radcliffe's decision, what he says is that the fact that there was formerly a dwelling on the property does not provide a legal justification for the new construction. In other words, he says that if you have a non-conforming protection with regard to a structure and you raise it, you lose the benefit of that nonconformity. That's well known to this commission. However, it doesn't change the fact that the lot itself pre-existed prior to the zoning regulations being adopted. It pre-existed when it was part of the B zone. It pre-existed when it was part of the beach zone, and it pre-existed when it was became part of the floodplain district, and the R2 regulations became applicable. So I want to just
don't you, and I appreciate that, but don't you, once you remove the dwelling, it is the dwelling which is a pre-existing, it is now a so you have a residence that is on a parcel.
Correct.
The zoning regulations are passed, and the structure on the parcel is now pre-existing, non-conforming structure, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
When you remove that structure, you lose the benefit of that pre-existing non-conformity.
As it relates to the structure.
Right.
But not as it relates to the pre-existing lot, which predates zoning.
But right, and so are you seeking then, I mean, and this is where I get a little confused by that argument, because you're not seeking to rebuild the pre-existing non-conforming home. You're not seeking to even build a new structure on the footprint of the old structure.
Correct.
This is a new house. It's a larger structure than was there before, in a different.
It's actually built on the same footprint and is exactly, really, except for FEMA compliance issues, the same house that was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2011. We haven't changed, as I think Ms. Harrigan can confirm, we haven't changed the location of the approved house, and we've elevated it in terms of current FEMA regulations. But I think the important point here is Mr. Green's arguments, which I'll address anyway, But
Yeah.
Mr. Green's arguments go to an assumption that if you have a pre-existing non-conforming structure upon which is built on a pre-existing non-conforming lot in terms of matters pertaining, for example, to lot shape, that if you raise the structure, that deprives you of the protections as the lot being a pre-existing lot. Now, you certainly lose the protections of the pre-existing nonconformity as it relates to the structure, setbacks, coverage, and the like, but the lot exists. And the lot, in this case, predates zoning, and the lot, and therefore, under Connecticut General Statutes 8-2, is a legally protected pre-existing nonconforming lot,
Okay.
regardless of how it's zoned today.
Do you have a citation to any case where this has been litigated and the court has determined that pre-existing non-conforming lot having had a structure which was demolished, razed years ago, owners seek to rebuild new structure on the lot, right? Challenged on the basis of, well, you raised the structure and now you lost the pre-existing non-conforming nature of the structure, and so you either can or cannot.
There's a plethora of law that makes the distinction that I'm making between a pre-existing nonconformity as it relates to a structure and a pre-existing nonconforming use as it relates to the lot itself. If the lot itself, be it vacant or not, is a legal lot predating zoning, then that pre-existing protection under 8-2 continues to apply. And that's exactly the case that you have here. That's what you have here. And this lot, as I said, has been utilized as a residence, and it's still to this day on an uninterrupted basis for over 60 years and longer probably has been taxed as a buildable lot because it predates zoning. And that doesn't mean so.
But Attorney Fallon.
Yes.
Attorney Commissioner Noonan.
How does it affect now this new build? Granted that it's a pre-existing non-conforming lot, but what does that entitle you to build? Are you entitled to just ignore the existing regulations?
No, not at all. If the structure does not comply with the regulations, then you have to get variances. Now, in this case, back in 2011, we got variances for lot area, lot coverage, FAR, the street line setback, and the ground floor area. So no, you have to, and now we no longer need the variances with regard to FAR and coverage. But to address your question, what it does preclude you from doing, Commissioner Noonan, is yes, you can't just walk in and say, hey, I got a vacant lot, it's a pre-existing lot, so I don't have to comply with the coverage or the FAR or setbacks. But you can't say, well, sir, I'm sorry, you can't build on that lot, which is Mr. Green's argument over the last 45 minutes, because the lot doesn't have the proper shape that is currently required under the existing regulations, because that goes to the lot, not the structure. So with regard to nonconformities that arise based upon what you want to build, a new structure, yes, you have to get variances if you don't comply. But you cannot deprive the property owner of their vested right under 8-2 as it relates to a pre-existing non-conforming lot, even though it may not comply to present lot area requirements or shape requirements.
Is that the basis for Judge? Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Noonan.
But so Attorney Green's points about what is his objections, the citation, the lot coverage, or the I'm sorry, I might have said wrong. Those deal with the lot and not the structure, is your point.
Correct. Although I will address them in a moment anyway, because I won't. I think they are addressable. But again, it's a fundamental point that I think your question raises, and that the chair's question raises. If I have a pre-existing non-conforming lot, and I tear a house down, so the lot becomes vacant, I cannot walk in and say, well, I have a pre-existing non-conforming lot, so I don't have to comply with my new construction relative to your coverage requirements, your FAR requirements, etc. I either have to comply or I have to get a variance, which is what this applicant did in 2011. However, what I can't have happen under 8-2 is if I show up to build a house, somebody can't say, oh, no, well, that lot now, you tore the house down. The lot is no longer a legal building lot because it doesn't comply with the current lot square requirements, because that's the essence of what 8-2 protects, okay? So that's what that's about.
And Attorney Fallon, is that the reason why Judge Radcliffe suggested that, not suggested, found that there was hardship supporting?
Yeah, if you look at Judge Radcliffe's decision, first of all, as I said, at page 5 of his decision, which is part of what was given to you by Attorney Green, he clearly makes a distinction between the loss of non-conforming status of a structure once it's demolished as opposed to the lot. He never says that the lot is not a buildable lot. He never says that the lot now requires a variance for lot square, because the lot exists. What he also says, if you look at it, is on page 15 of his report, which is what I sent you in. He basically sets forth what the hardship here is in terms of granting the variance. And I won't read it to you, but it's at page 15. The other thing
I'll read it. If a hardship is created by the enactment or an amendment of the zoning regulations, and a predecessor entitled could have sought a variance, a subsequent owner can also request a variance.
Right.
Citations omitted. This situation, well, and that is what he premised the hardship on, right? Like I wrote this lot before, there were an enactment of new ordinances or regulations which now would otherwise prohibit me from exploiting the land and building the residence on a residentially zoned lot. And so I'm seeking a variance because of that, and that itself is the hardship.
Correct. And what he goes on to say, if you flip the page at page 16, which I think is also important, and I'll address in my summary, is he says, furthermore, the granting of the variances by the Zoning Board of Appeals is consistent with Fairfield's comprehensive plan. A single-family residence is a use permitted in a residence R2 zone and subject to the issuance of a special permit by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The area of Old Dam Road surrounding the subject property is dedicated to single-family residences. And as long as I'm touching on Judge Radcliffe's decision, and then I'll be done with that, I would also have you look at the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17. The very argument that Attorney Green is making here tonight, almost 9 years after Judge Radcliffe's decision, as it relates to the setback, exactly the same argument he made before Judge Radcliffe during the proceedings in 2013. And if you look at the bottom of page 16, it says, the plaintiffs claim that the action of the board violates the provisions of section 31.2.36 of the regulations is equally unavailing. That section has no application where a right-of-way is 20 feet wide, as is the case regarding Old Dam Road. Under these circumstances, the street line is the property line. Therefore, the application properly computed the distance for the setback. So that's been judicially determined. I think your staff would also agree with that.
Are the calculations in the grid the same calculations that were before Judge Radcliffe?
No, because as I told you when we met the last time, there was a change between that decision and now, when the 1-year tidal flood line was changed by FEMA from 4.8 to 3.7. But I would like to call on Mr. Spath to address the comments that were made by Attorney Green and Mr. Trinkus with regard to the calculation of lot area, because in fact they're wrong, and Mr. Spath will make that clear in terms of what was included, what was excluded with regard to the lot area calculation. Mr. Spath, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. You were present during Mr. Green's presentation?
Yes, I was.
All right, and you are the licensed surveyor that prepared the site plan and the zoning grid that's before the commission tonight?
That is correct.
Could you address Mr. Green's comment with regard to the lot area calculation as it relates to the provisions of the regulations and what was excluded or not?
Okay, you'll see we do on our grid again, up in the top, it states the lot area is 9,153 square feet. That's net lot area. Down below, it says, right below our grid, it says net lot area to elevation 3.7, excluding the area of the 10-foot right of way. Total lot area equals 58,400 square feet. So I don't know, Mr. Trink said he scanned our map in and kind of did that. I don't know if he maybe was off a little bit on the scale factor or something, but it absolutely does not include that 10-foot right of way, and it goes to the 3.7 line.
And you're a licensed surveyor, correct?
I am a licensed surveyor in the state of Connecticut.
And is Mr. Trinkus a licensed surveyor to the best of your knowledge?
I believe he is a professional engineer.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. If I can continue, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the summary comments, I also want to call your attention to the report of Mr. Pop, who's also in the room tonight, of Environmental Land Solutions. I'd first of all point out that he not only did the report that was submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals when they unanimously granted the application in 2011, but obviously he did update that report as of May 11th, 2021. He cites a number of things that are very, I think, relevant and important, and I'm going to take a moment to go over those. First of all, if you look at page 2 of his report, he does cite a letter from a DEEP biologist, Dr. Let me just pull this up here if I might, Dawn McKay, and she states that she has determined that the proposed activities, and remember please, we are building a single family house of the same size on the property at the same location. So what was approved by the ZBA and approved by the court in 2011 and 2013 is the same footprint. It's exactly the same house. The only changes are, as I will get into, we have, with Ms. Harrigan's comment, updated to ensure FEMA compliance. But the house is the same, is the same, the location is the same. And Dr. McKay says that there will not be any impact on...
Attorney Fallon, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry. On page 2 of Mr. Pop's report, Dr. McKay indicates that what we propose, a single family house at this location, will not have any impact on any extant populations of federal, state, endangered, threatened, or other species of concern. If you go on and you look at Mr. Pop's report at page 4, that's where we get to the heart of the matter here. And I think he proposes some measures for mitigation at page 4 to ensure that there'll be no potential impacts to coastal resources. And all of those recommendations have been adopted. Most importantly, when you go to page 5 of Mr. Pop's report, he talks about and he makes findings, and he is the only environmental professional of record here, with the possible exception of Ms. Harrigan, who also has carefully reviewed this application. And he finds, and I'll quote from page 5, that the subject land has been historically used for and is suitable to support a residence without adversely impacting coastal resources. The proposed residential development is consistent with the surrounding residential development and will not affect off-site coastal resources. The proposed project does not disrupt the natural environment of the coastal resources and will not adversely impact sound economic growth. The project is consistent with coastal policy. He then references the fact that sewer lines are provided for. He talks about tidal wetlands. All construction activities are located well away from any tidal vegetation, and no adverse impact to tidal wetlands will occur as a result of this project. And lastly, he talks about coastal hazards. Development in the coastal area will be accomplished in a manner so as to minimize hazards to life and property. The first floor of the new residences will be elevated several feet above base flood elevation. The proposed air conditioning units and generator will be raised above 100 feet of elevation, consistent with coastal policies. And at the end of his report, at page 5 and 6. He basically makes clear that there are actually some benefits here to coastal resources, including the proposed drainage system, which will infiltrate collected stormwater from the house's roof and driveway into the ground. He talks also about the recommended mitigative plantings that are part of this application, and that again, Ms. Harrigan had some input on. And at the end, under a summary, he makes what are the only and really the uncontroverted findings here with regard to the CAM. That same CAM application is approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals almost a decade ago. That the site has been residentially developed in the past. All proposed activities are located on maintained land. And again, I point that out. This is property that's been maintained. It's grass. It's not some estuary or environmentally sensitive area. The property will not disturb any natural coastal resources, and 2 stormwater recharge chambers will provide infiltration of stormwater runoff. So at the end of the day, you have uncontroverted testimony from Mr. Pop that this application is consistent with all coastal area management policies. So let me take a deep breath and summarize here what we're looking at. Just let me get my stuff. Okay. The floodplain regulations do apply the R2 zone standards, but that is not in derogation of the legal rights afforded and protections afforded this property under Connecticut General Statutes 8-2 as a pre-existing non-conforming lot. This lot has existed for many years. It has been owned by the family since 1963. The family has paid taxes on it continuously for over 58 years as a buildable lot, and it did have a residence on it until 1997. So all the time that Mr. Green took to talk to you about the square and everything else really isn't relevant, because the lot is protected. And as I said to Mr. Noonan's question, which was a good question, that doesn't mean you can build whatever you want here. That's why we had to get a coverage variance and an FAR variance in 2011, although we don't need them now based upon the changes of the tidal flood elevation. The single family residence that we've had for many decades, and the one that we proposed, is a permitted use in both the R2 zone and the Residence B zone. As such, I think it becomes very difficult, and Judge Radcliffe would agree, to claim that the reconstruction of the house on this lot, which is in a residential neighborhood, is not consistent with the comprehensive plan of development. Let me address the specific standards.
You're breaking up.
Okay.
Sorry, Attorney Fallon, you're breaking up.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Can you hear me?
It's yeah, I can hear you, just a little bit of choppy.
All right, I'll try to be not choppy. But section 27.4.
No, it's really not good.
Is that better?
No.
Should I phone in? Maybe.
Maybe turn your video off. Let's try that first.
Okay. Is that any?
Might get better.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll keep my video off. You all know what I look like anyway.
That's fine.
All right. Section 27.4.1. This, as I've said before, single-family residential use is permitted in the R2 zone. You can't very well say that the reintroduction of a single-family home on this property is inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. That's what is there. It's consistent with all the other lots in the area, none of which, by the way, I would predict to you comply with the R2 zone standards, because they all pre-existed the adoption of the R2 zone. We had a dwelling on it for many decades. As to the height issue, the height complies with the regulations. The application is not only consistent with the FEMA requirements, but it also is consistent with and complies with the height requirements in the R2 zone. The street setback is now 17.3 feet, although we did get a variance for it to be at 16 feet. So as far as section 27.4.1, it is very difficult, I think, for the opponents who just don't want a house there. They were at least candid enough to admit it, to claim that we don't meet the requirements of section 27.4.1 when all of those factors are in place, including the fact that it's a permitted use in the zone. And that's supported by Judge Radcliffe as well. Section 27.2 under fire consideration. Again, this property had for many, many decades. It's consistent with other uses in the neighborhood and the character of the area. Old Dam Road is a public road. You can't say you can't build a house on Old Dam Road, even though you had a house there before, and even though all your opposing construction have a house there as well. And the reestablishment
is starting to break up again.
The reestablishment of a single family home on this lot is not going to have any adverse impacts with regard to fire. Section 27.4.3 deals with parking. Again, the parking we propose complies with all provisions of the regulations. Indeed, if you look at the gravel area that's referred to in some of the neighbor comments, beyond the garage, it extends on the right side 15.6 feet to the street, and on the left side, 30 feet to the street, so that you could easily accommodate up to 3 more cars in that gravel area, bringing total parking available on site to 5, which is more than I would suggest to you many of the neighbors opposing this application can provide. Section 27.4.5 is the master plan. I've basically commented on that before. There was a house here for decades and decades. It's a permitted use under the regulations. You have a judicial finding from Judge Radcliffe relative to the fact that it does comply with the comprehensive zoning plan. We are consistent with all policies. As I said before, the CAM Act, I've cited you to Mr. Pop's material, which is uncontroverted. We comply with the construction standards of the R2 zone. I've said before, and I've just reiterated, we comply with the standards for approval under section 27. And at the end of the day, what you have before you today is a very carefully and thoroughly reviewed plan by your staff, particularly Ms. Harrigan, to confirm that the proposed plan is in compliance with all the requirements and standards of the FEMA regulations, the Coastal Area Management Statute, and your own flood protection regulations. And the red herrings that my brother throws up at you to try to say that when you have a pre-existing non-conforming lot and you tear down a house on that lot, you lose the protections afforded to the lot under 8-2 would be a very, very revolutionary finding in the state of Connecticut land use jurisprudence, because the lot is there. All those homes are there because they were all created, probably under some map that was filed, predating zoning regulations. So at the end of the day, you come back to compliance with the CAM statute, your flood district regulations, and in this particular case, I'd respectfully submit to you, we've more than met our burden. This is the same house that was approved in 2011, the approval of which was judicially upheld by the court. We simply want to build it, and we're now building it in even more rigid compliance because of changes in the regulations with the FEMA regulations, the CAM statute, et cetera. So we would very much appreciate your favorable consideration of the application. And I'm sorry if we had a problem with my technical issues. Thank you.
Sound good now. Very good. Does any members of the commission have any questions for Attorney Fallon? Commissioner Braun?
Yes, Attorney Fallon, could you possibly give us a copy of the entire Radcliffe decision? I've sought to have a piece from you and a piece from Attorney Green, but I don't have the whole thing in one place.
Very good, but Mr. Wentz has that. It's part of his file. I'm happy to provide that. I think
Okay.
I can get you that. Yeah.
Number 2, are there wetlands on site? What watershed is this? This isn't Mill River, is it?
No, and there are no wetlands, inland wetlands on site.
Because the wetlands line that Attorney Green talked about, is that out of this property? But I'm confused.
I'll let Mr. Spath address that. I believe he's still on.
Is the wetlands line that's shown where the wetlands is, or where the wetlands upland review area ends? I'm just curious. Was there any wetlands review by Conservation Commission at all on this?
None was required.
Okay. that must mean that the wetlands line they show that's outside of the boundary of the property is the upland review area line, not the actual flagged wetlands lines, but maybe Mr. Spath can answer that.
Mr. Spath, can you just confirm that?
They are tidal wetlands, so they're not wetlands.
Okay. And in terms of the height of the building, it's just a shade under 40 feet. Is that higher than the other houses nearby because they were built before FEMA or they were they haven't been rebuilt since FEMA regulations?
I would assume that's a reasonable assumption, although I can't represent that. I haven't really checked, but I do know that we do comply with the height requirements in the R2 zone.
And then just to follow up, I don't remember if you answered this question or not, but the 138, and back to that grid that Attorney Green was talking about, the 138 square that you found versus, which is obviously greater than the 80-foot square that would be required. Does that include, you said that's outside of the town right of way. Is that outside of the state jurisdiction line and the wetlands line and the other line that he mentioned?
Yeah, I believe it is. His comments were addressed to what was excluded from the lot area calculation, but yes, I think that's correct.
Can Mr. Spath just verify that, just so I have engineer to engineer, because the other engineer said it's a different, I'm confused about that issue.
So the question is, Commissioner, just so
what is excluded from the 138 calculation and what is included in terms of town jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, wetlands, and all that?
The 138 calculation was the comments made by Mr. Green about the lot square, which I've addressed, is the pre-existing non-conforming use. The question of Mr. Spath, are you on there? I mean, your question I'm just a little unclear in your question.
I think I understand what she's asking.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm asking the question Attorney Green asked us to ask, which I don't know if anyone asked before, but I'm asking it, but I'm trying to ask it the way he suggested we ask it, which is, I think, do the boundaries of the 138 square you found to exist in an area which Attorney Green claims should be at least 80 square. Attorney Green claims it's not 80 square, you're claiming it's 138 square. The discrepancy between what, it being under 80 or at least, or almost twice that, what is included or excluded from your calculation of the square? Is the town right of way along the road excluded? Is the floodplain excluded? Is the DEP jurisdiction line excluded, et cetera?
Okay. Yes. So that 138.94 square that you see up there, that is actually a carryover from the 2006 map when the building square was actually allowed to have wetlands incorporated in it. That regulation definition, I believe, changed in the 2009 regulation change. So that's just a typo, but there is an 80-foot square available on the property. But as Attorney Fallon said, this is a pre-existing non-conforming lot, so the square is not an issue. We're not questioning whether the lot is conforming. We're questioning whether the structure is conforming.
Right. So regardless of whether it's legally required or not, it does include the state jurisdiction line, which is the same as the tidal wetlands line on the left side, I guess the west side, perhaps?
Yes, that number that we had up there, like I said, was a carryover from 2006 that we obviously overlooked because that was, prior to the change of the map. If you notice, this original map was done on March 1st, 2006, revised in 2020. So that's just an oversight on our part that the regulation did change, but as John stated, it wouldn't change the fact of the lot being.
Okay, I understand. That's a legal conclusion, just from a pure measurement point of view. So the 138, based on, why is that a typo then? If because it includes the wetlands and it normally wouldn't in today's.
Because in 2006 we were allowed to include the wetlands. So in 2006 that we were able to fit 138.94 foot square.
Okay, so it does include the wetlands, and does it include the town right of way?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I do not have the full CAD. I'm looking at the map, but as you notice, there's a break line because the map's so large. I would doubt it. No, we wouldn't include the town right away. I can actually answer that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that all, Commissioner Braun? Thank you. Any other commissioners have any other questions or comments? Mr. Wen?
I just, in reference to Commissioner Braun's first question, the entire text of the Judge Radcliffe's decision was included in the email. It's one of the exhibits that's labeled Fallon exhibits in the email that was sent earlier today. So you should already have the entire text of that decision.
When I was looking through Attorney Fallon's exhibit, I thought I saw it jump to like page 14 or something.
No, that's correct. I had the same. The Fallon exhibits is not a complete copy of the decision.
That is correct. And I can get I think Mr. Wen has one in the old ZBA file, but I'm happy to provide the complete decision as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Listen, that's
I apologize for the confusion. I thought it was.
No, it's not. It's
just email that into Mr. Wentz, and he'll circulate that to the commission. I mean,
that first thing.
what otherwise need to do is give us a citation, but that's fine. Very good.
Thank you.
Other questions and comments from Mr. Fallon?
One question.
Commissioner Francis.
Can your architect comment on what trees are being removed? There was a pretty long discussion of beech and red cherry and gray birch. Are these all being removed or retained?
Our architect was present, Mr. Achilles, but he had to leave for another hearing in Westport, so I know he's not on the line. But I think either I don't know, Ms. Harrigan or Mr. Spath could answer that question as far as that.
Yeah, there was a discussion of a lot being planted.
Yes, there's a rigorous planting plan, correct.
One was just a swamp maple, but it sounded like there were several very desirable varieties on site, and I hope they're being retained.
I think they are, but I'll let the staff address that during your work session because they're very familiar with the landscape plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Was that a hand? No. All right. Very good. Thank you, Attorney Fallon.
Thank you, members of the commission. Thank you very much.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing on this item, and we'll call the next item on our agenda. 2780 Reading Road, a re-subdivision application of John Russell for 2 lots in a AAA zone.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, and let me know if I break up on you because I will cease with my video if I do. I'm John Fallon for the record. I'm representing the estate of John Russell. With us tonight is Elizabeth Militia, who is the daughter of Mr. Russell, and as well as the executrix of his estate. Also on with us tonight is Mr. Michael Petula, who is our site engineer with regard to the project. I'll be very brief. This property is located at 2780 Reading Road. It's located in the AAA zone. The application before you proposes a 2-lot re-subdivision. The 2 lots to be created, one with an existing house on it, and one a vacant lot, are obviously in total compliance with all provisions of the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations. Public water is available. The septic system has been reviewed as part of the inland wetlands permit approval process and by the town health department and has been approved. The inland wetlands approval was 2020-2105, January 7, 2021. On June 11th of this year, the commission, pursuant to the provisions of section 2.3.8 of your subdivision regulations, determined that they would want a fee in lieu with regard to the open space here that was otherwise provided. The applicant obviously recognizes that, concurs with that, and will abide by those provisions. So it's a pretty straightforward subdivision application. As you know, the standards for your actions under a subdivision is administrative. And if the application complies with the provisions of the zoning and subdivision regulations, then it's entitled to an approval. And I believe respectfully, that's the case here. So appreciate your attention. Mr. Petula and I would be pleased to answer questions if you have any.
Very good. I didn't see any. I was just trying to look at the site plan. Do any of the any commissioners have any questions for Attorney Fallon? We have the same. I just want to look at the drives.
Yeah. As expected.
Very good. Sorry. Any other commissioners have any questions for Attorney Fallon?
I have a question.
Commissioner Braun?
So a wetlands permit was granted for this application. I'm trying to look at your site.
Yes,
plan.
January 7th, 2021. It's inland wetlands permit 2021-21-05. And
Would it be possible to get us a copy of that?
when I email the Radcliffe decision tomorrow morning to Judge Judge Wendt, I will also email a full copy of the inland wetland permit.
I hope Judge Wendt can send it on to us. I'm just looking at I'm trying to understand the site plan just a little bit. I'm trying to understand it. The property, it borders Brett Road and Reading Road. Is this like an L-shaped property and you're cutting it?
It's a corner lot, and there's obviously a substantial conservation easement that was imposed and agreed to as part of the inland wetlands proceedings. But I think the subdivision map shows the lot layout.
Okay, now I see it. Yeah. So you have, there's no houses there now, or there's one house and you're adding another house next door?
We're adding a house. The Mr. Russell's homestead, it will remain and is situated as shown on the plan.
Okay.
There'll be another building lot now, subject to your approval. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Attorney Fallon?
Yes, Mr. Noonan.
Can you please repeat what you were saying about fee and lieu? I was pulling things up and I missed that comment.
Yeah, we had made a request. Our original plan that was submitted in accordance with your subdivision regulations proposed an open space area, and we submitted that for your consideration. There were also comments from the Land Acquisition Commission and the Conservation Commission, and those entities recommended to you that rather than take the open space, which they didn't feel was of substantial value, you impose a fee in lieu. And on June 11th, 2021, you voted to do so that in accordance with section 2.3.8, this subdivision would be approved subject to a fee in lieu rather than a dedication of a portion of the parcel as open space.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Attorney Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Good evening to you. Thank you.
Any members of the public, and Ms. Harrigan, any members of the public sign up to be heard on this item?
I haven't seen anybody added in the chat.
Okay.
If we want to do just one last call.
Yeah, one last call. Calling for any members of the public that wish to be heard on this one. I'm not hearing anyone. I don't see anyone. No one's turning their video on. Going once, going twice. Very well. I will close the public comment portion of this public hearing. Attorney Fallon, there is nothing for you to rebut.
Correct.
I will therefore close the public hearing on this item.
Thank you again very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Next and last item on our agenda is 5545 Park Avenue zoning compliance application of Primrose Development LLC for a 120 unit residential development pursuant to section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes in an R3 zone. And this is a matter which has been continued from June 8, 2021 and June 22nd, 2021. And I believe we were in our public comment portion of the public hearing, which is where we are resuming. Attorney Rizzio? Yep, I see you.
Okay, hey, Chairman, yes, I believe we got through most of the public comment. I don't want to end up going back and rebutting, so Mr. Green made his presentation, Beth Ale Rooney made her presentation, Marshall Weiss made his presentation.
Right, no, you don't have to recount. I was simply seeking to confirm with you that, where we were. I'm going to resume the public comment. The folks who have spoken previously shouldn't speak again. They said their made their arguments for the record. We have received also written material, but for those members of the public who have not yet been heard and who wish to speak, please sign up in the chat. I will make a call. When we finish with public comment, then I will flip it back over to the applicant for their rebuttal. And it is my absolute hope that we will complete this public hearing before our curfew. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. So with that, any members of the public, Ms. Harrigan, did we have any carryover from last time, or are there any new? And if you're not speaking, please mute.
I don't see anybody new listed in the chat.
Okay. Are there any members of the public? Yes.
Joel Green, representing the Merritt Parkway Conservancy.
Yeah.
For the record, when we had adjourned, we had reserved the right to address some elevations and some materials that we've submitted. We talked about the applicant providing the Merritt Parkway Conservancy with CAD information, and we were going to prepare a drawing with elevations on it. And we've done that, and we would like to address the commission on those matters.
Okay. Very good. Then please proceed.
So we have provided the commission with 4 exhibits. The first one is the previously proposed, a view of the previously proposed structure. And if I can screen share for a moment. There was some, I'm sorry, this is the currently proposed building. I opened the wrong one, just a moment. All right, I'm having some problems opening that.
Well, Mr. Bergen can share those. Those are in the record. We received those by email.
Yeah, there was some confusion in the record as to the originally proposed exhibit. There we go. So this was the building that was originally proposed, and there was some improper labeling in the applicant's submission. So this was, the point is though, this was what I'm going to call the 4-story structure over parking that was proposed. And then if we can put up the 6-story one now, this is the building that is now proposed. It's really 7 stories because of the way it's configured. And you can see the 7 stories in the distance. And the next exhibit that we've submitted is a view of the structure. And just for context, and so that the commission understands, this building is very perched up on the property. Those trees that are shown are actually 50-foot trees, which we believe really overstates the height of the existing trees. And those trees are all located in the Merritt Parkway, within the right-of-way of the Merritt Parkway. None of those trees are on the applicant's property, nor does the applicant really provide any meaningful screening on its property of the structure. And then if you show the next slide, this is a profile view, basically looking north or east or northeasterly. And it sort of demonstrates, it shows the property line, it shows how the building is perched up. As I had shown you in the Merritt Parkway Conservancy had demonstrated at the last session of this hearing, those trees, they're shown as deciduous trees. We drew them in a clear fashion because, as you could see from the views from the Merritt Parkway, those trees are really quite thin. And you can see through them. And I guess I should note that the Merritt Parkway Conservancy did not oppose the 4-story structure, but we certainly, and that 4-story structure would be visible to some degree from the Parkway, but the structure, the 6 or 7-story structure truly stands out and is so prominent and so incredibly visible that it is our position that it just significantly and adversely impacts the historic resource, which is the Merritt Parkway. I would like to recall Mr. Haynes briefly, and he is the executive director of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. I know that Mr. Parker wants to address you as well as to the methodology on these drawings briefly. Maybe the appropriate order would be to call Mr. Parker briefly just to address the methodology in creating this drawing. And then and Mr. Haynes, we will try to be brief. I know the commission is eager to wrap this up, and as are we. So maybe I can call upon David Parker, who has appeared before the commission before. He is an architect with David Parker Architects in Southport. And Mr. Parker, if you could join in the meeting and briefly describe your training, education, and experience for the commission to establish your standing as an expert in architecture.
Hello, and thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to share this information with you. My name is David Parker. I am an architect, as Attorney Green said, practicing in Southport. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia, a master's degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. I am a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and trustee of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I've testified various times as an expert in matters of preservation. The drawings that Attorney Fallon shared with you, we were not given the CAD files, and so we had to work from the drawings that were presented to the commission, and we correlated those with the topographical maps that show the elevations of the Merritt Parkway. And the heights of the buildings are as the applicant showed them. And as you can see on the drawings, the proposed building rises 87 feet plus 70 17-foot high retaining wall for a total of 104 feet above existing grade at the northwest corner of the applicant's property. And the building is over 112 feet above the Merritt roadway. Additionally, the proposed building is more than twice the height of the existing trees on the adjacent Merritt Parkway land. And as Attorney Green has said, there's no room on the applicant's site plan to accommodate screening, which wouldn't in any event ever grow high enough to screen the building at this height. Additionally, I'd like to note that the proposed structure is 325 feet long, facing the parkway. It's broader, it's massive, and it's broader than any buildings next to the parkway, as far as I know. The building is really incredibly large to be this close to the National Register listed Merritt Parkway. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to next call upon Wes Haynes, who's the Executive Director of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. Mr. Haynes, if you could just once again state your education, experience, and training, that would be a help. And that if you could address the impact of the proposed development on the historic parkway.
Thank you, Attorney Green, and thank you, members of the commission. My name is Wes Haynes. I've had a 40-year career in historic preservation as a preservation planner. I'm currently the executive director of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. I am very, very well versed in historic preservation from the planning end to the execution end. I want to just start my remarks by expressing a little bit of frustration, both with the applicant for not sharing the CAD drawings and making us do the drawings for you, and also with you. You've been seem to be very incurious about how large this building is. They presented you with a rendering of a building that they don't plan to build, that they're not applying for here. And you didn't ask them to go back and render it the way it's going to look. The looks are very important. And let me just back up a little bit and explain what the Merritt Parkway is as a historic resource. Places are recognized as historic resources for one of two reasons, and sometimes both, because an important event happened there or because of the way they look. And to be designated, that those are the basis of significance that parkways are and historic house museums are designated as historic resources. The parkway has both of those aspects, but I want to address the visual character. The parkway is a product of the City Beautiful movement. It is one of the most important built structures, landscapes that was developed during the City Beautiful movement, which was a major period in American architecture. It's recognized as having national significance for that. The City Beautiful movement was all about classicism, the presentation of the experience of being in an ensemble of an environment. And here on the parkway, the ensemble is the landscape and the bridges. And the bridges were meant to enhance the landscape and vice versa and work well together. We're right next to a bridge at this very sensitive part of the parkway. And we're also trying to basically capture the naturalistic feeling of the parkway. The state has invested $350 million over the last 25 years in enhancing and beautifying the parkway. There is nothing beautiful about this project. This project will be an intrusion into the very essential architectural character of the Merritt Parkway. There is nothing that you can say positively about this contributing to the experience of the Merritt Parkway. If you do this, you're going in the face of your own POCD. which encourages you at gateways and throughout the town of Fairfield to respect preservation. But you are going to differentiate this stretch of the parkway. The welcome mat you put out in Fairfield on this stretch of the parkway is going to be a different welcome mat than Greenwich and New Canaan, even Stamford to a large part, and New Canaan. Those municipalities have worked very hard to protect the parkway. They see it, they understand it as an asset to their own town's identity. This is the largest historic resource in your town, and I urge you to protect it by denying this application or knocking it back significantly in height. It's just god awful. Thank you.
Mr. Haynes, just briefly, if you could assist the commission, and obviously we've raised grounds for denial based on the lack of a wetland permit for this particular building, but can you just offer some guidance to the commission on how the commission might reduce the size of this building by balancing the need for affordable housing with the need to protect historic resources? What are the modifications that you would ask this commission to impose if this commission does not feel that a denial is warranted?
Three conditions: reduction in height at a minimum by 2 stories, a change in the color to something that does not is not the opposing color to the greenery on the side of the parkway, something that blends in with the parkway a little bit more, and a very, very rigorous planting plan, which would need to be worked out with DOT, because the only way to plant out this building would be to plant it out on the state right-of-way. As we demonstrated at the last hearing, the trees are deciduous and they're quite straggly. We need to get a lot of conifers in there at some point to just make this building go away as much as we can do it. So those would be 3 conditions that we would request you impose on this project.
Thank you. I have no further questions of Mr. Haynes, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if the commission has questions. I would like to briefly call on Mr. Trinkus as well.
Okay, does anybody, any members of the commission have any questions? Commissioner Braun.
Would moving it back as well as down be beneficial, or moving it back wouldn't really matter as much as reducing the height?
Moving it back would help, but I don't think there's a lot of space there to move it back to. It's just, this is an upzoning of a lot that they haven't left a lot of buildable space left over.
I'm confused about the red area. That might not be a question for you. The parts that are colored in red, is that the original size, or is that the 4? That looks like that might be the original height on this rendering you have.
I can address that. That is what the applicant is showing in terms of the cladding of the building. So they're proposing some kind of brick coat on that part of the building, and then the other tones that you see on that elevation are some kind of composite panel that have some very strange stepping pattern of different colors on them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, I'd like to call on Mr. Trinkus, and he appeared before the commission at the last hearing, but and the only reason I call him is to address new materials which were submitted by the applicant today.
Good evening, Steve Trinkus again for the record. I'm a professional engineer with an office in Southbury, Connecticut. We just received the response from the Huntington Company dated July 24th earlier today. And I only have a few comments. The applicant takes a statement from the DEP 2004 Stormwater Manual that says it's to provide guidance and is intended to augment, not supplant, professional judgment with regard to stormwater quality issues. This is not the best language a DEP probably should have used, but the bottom line is, as a professional engineer, our obligation is public health, safety, welfare, not to a client, not to a project, not to, with all due respect, a regulatory agency, but it is to that higher standard under our license. Many engineers have thrown this language back at me when I've done a review because they said, well, I know what I'm doing, but they haven't been able to prove that they're doing. In this particular case, the applicant now says this is a wet pond, but yet infiltration is going to occur. If you have a wet pond, you have a permanent pool in the bottom of the pond. No infiltration occurs because water will not infiltrate into a saturated zone. It's against the laws of physics. It simply doesn't happen. So that claim of exfiltration that they have in the hydrologic model is not valid. There will be no loss of runoff volume because they're not infiltrating it. There's a series of dry wells proposed within the parking area, many of which are located in fill material. Now, as this building is going to be elevated because of the retaining wall, you're going to be placing structural fill in there and compacting it to 95 or 99% proctor density, depending on the material, which is basically making that material impervious to anything because you want to build on it and you don't want it to fall over. So these dry wells that are set into this material, even if they're 1 foot above seasonal groundwater, aren't going to infiltrate because the soil below them is basically a layer of concrete. They state that there is now a stormwater cleaner as proposed in the pond. I looked at the revised plans that were on file on through the town website. I didn't see any product, which that is. The manufacturer evidently states it will remove 80 to 90% of TSS. Manufacturer data is based on lab data. It is not based on real world monitoring results. So as a design engineer, you have to take a huge grain of salt with that. They do provide a hydrodynamic separator, which is a secondary stormwater practice, and an online configuration on the plans. I believe this was on the plans before. And again, in that particular configuration, the removal efficiencies for total suspended solids is around 29%, not 75 or 80%. So water quality is not being addressed. We've had the same issue, and this occurred with the project on Black Rock, where Laura Pooley, who I have a lot of respect for, says, well, we can do the soil testing later on to make sure this works. Well, the broad question is, if the project gets approved and you go out there and do the soil testing and you can't do your stormwater management system as proposed, now what do? You have a serious problem. Now, if the contractor starts building this multi-million-dollar building and all of a sudden can't make the stormwater work, they're going to be looking for somebody to hang out to dry, and that person is going to be the design engineer. You have got to know that your stormwater management system will work during the approval process. If you modify it in the field, fine. You at least have one system that you know will work. You can't wing it and say, well, we're going to do testing later and we'll adjust it in the field. That doesn't work, and in my professional opinion, that's also not in compliance with the standard of care under our license to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. Because if stormwater management system fails, a lot of bad things happen, and not very many good things will ever come out of that. Thank you.
Mr. Trinkus, can you just briefly for the commission, in terms of their jurisdiction, in the context of this application, can you describe the impacts if that system is not functioning properly?
If water quality is not being addressed, there will be increased pollutant loads discharged from this wet pond to the downgrading wetland, which based on a field inspection goes further west. There is a low wetland area on the, I guess would be the south side of the Merritt Parkway. It appears there's a box culvert that goes under the Merritt Parkway, and then there is residential development on the north side, and that stream comes out and goes through there. And it appears eventually it goes to the stream that runs parallel to the road behind the Parkway service station there. I don't know the name of the stream, but it's right at the bottom there. You'll also have increased runoff volumes because you're not going to be infiltrating any water. And depending on the type of storm event, if you get a significant downpour with basically the entire lot being paved, there's going to be a large volume of water that's going to be discharged. and potentially could increase the flooding potential. Maybe not in the wetland on the south side of the Merritt, but the north side where the residential development is. Some of those homes are located in close proximity to an open stream and would likely experience more flooding based on what I saw in the field.
And just in terms of public health and safety, what you're saying is that basically this commission is being asked to fly blind on this soil testing. Is that correct?
That would be a good way of putting it.
And if that soil testing is incorrect, and that soil testing has not been completed as satisfactorily as you've described it, to a reasonable certainty, there will be impacts off-site, including ones that invoke public health and safety.
Yes.
I have no further questions of Mr. Trinkus.
Very good.
One question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Commissioner Francis?
When is the soil testing done in the timeline of construction?
In my professional opinion, one of the first things I do is soil testing on a site. Whether it's for a residential house, for septic or stormwater management system. It's one of the first things we do in order to see what conditions we have and in order to get an idea of what type of stormwater management system we can put in there. Do we have really well-drained soils that we can use some LID practice such as bioretention, or do we have hard pan soils where we're basically going to have to build a sealed underground bathtub to handle the stormwater? It's one of the first things I do on development projects.
And then what about the storm retention?
Well, the retention goes along with what the applicable municipal standards are. Most towns are requiring peak rate or zero increase in runoff from 2-year up to perhaps 100-year and everything in between. Other towns just focus on a 25-year storm event. Many towns do not have provisions for addressing water quality at this point, although that's becoming more commonplace. So you have to address multiple aspects. Many communities do not require reductions in runoff volume, but that is the proverbial elephant in the room from a stormwater management, because flooding is all about volume. Increased volume leads to increased flooding.
You're right. We do find it frustrating as commissioners because it's always, well, the town engineer has approved it. It's hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Braun?
This is in the Mill River watershed. So that means that every drop of water that escapes this property eventually flows into Mill River. Would you agree with that? And also, if there's any toxins that are going in, they would end up in Mill River as well.
If it is, I can't confirm independently that it's within the watershed, as I have not reviewed your map. I would take your word for it, Commissioner. But yes, anything that's not treated here will be carried further downstream, as many of the pollutants are soluble, so they stay in solution and just move with the flow all the way down.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Trinkus, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Certainly, he's your witness.
Mr. Trinkus, in terms of the actual, as the system is shown as it presently exists, is it your opinion then that to a reasonable certainty this system will not function as it is designed, and that it will discharge pollutants from the site in the way by way of stormwater transfer?
Yes, it is. The applicant is proposing what are basically several different what are termed by the DEP manual secondary practices: deep sump catch basins, hooded outlets, an online separator, the dry wells, and structural fill. use of a bunch of secondary practices does not equate to a primary practice. The proposed wet pond is not in compliance with the standards of the DEP manual because a wet pond requires the permanent pool to be a minimum of 4 foot in depth, up to 8 foot in depth, with also a forebay which contains a minimum of 10% of the water quality volume to trap sediments and things before it gets into a wet pond. A wet pond should also be kind of longer and narrower to increase the flow path from the inlet to the outlet, and that's not the case here. So even though a wet pond is a primary practice, it is not designed in such a fashion that it will perform that function as it's intended in the manual.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Trinkus. I want to thank the commission for your generous patience, and we took a little more time than I expected this evening, but so I won't give you the long wrap up. I just want to get to it. The Merritt Parkway Conservancy urges the commission to deny the application for many reasons, but most notably, as I'd gone into in greater detail at the last hearing, the fact that this particular building has not been the subject of, does not have a wetland permit for the design of this building. We had submitted a letter from George Logan of Rima Ecological supporting that, supporting the need for that permit by virtue of potentially different impacts on wetlands adjacent to the site. We also feel that the commission should deny this application because of its adverse impact on the historic resources, as you've heard from Mr. Haynes this evening. And if the commission in its jurisdiction in balancing the need for affordable housing with sort of the need to protect the historic resources, I would just urge the commission to bear in mind sort of where is the line drawn on preserving these historic resources. You're all familiar with the Merritt Parkway. It is a gem. It is obviously under attack as we've seen, and you saw with the application involving 4185. It does merit protection. This sort of intrusion on historic resources really happens gradually and then suddenly, and you turn around in years at the path we're going in and realize that it's been breached in many respects. So the time to draw the line is now. The time to draw the line is here. So at the very least, as Mr. Haynes had testified, at the very least, we would ask the commission to put this back to the applicant to alter the design, to reduce the height of the building by at least 2 stories, to change the exterior treatment of the building in a manner that is more consistent with the adjacent historic resource. If the applicant can move the building further away, so be it. That the applicant propose a planting plan that would be more consistent and would be more protective of the viewscape from the parkway. You saw the pictures that exist. The site is wide open to the parkway, particularly in the autumn and in the winter and the early spring. And I hope you recognize that the Merritt Parkway is an asset that merits protection by this commission. I want to thank you for your very generous patience, for accommodating us, and for hearing us this evening. We're available to answer any questions, but once again, thank you.
Very well. Thank you very much, Attorney Green. Final call for any questions. I think we've said our piece. Very good. Last call for any members of the public who wish to be heard on this item. Last call. One once, one twice. Very good. I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing, and I'll turn it back over to you, Attorney Rubio, for your rebuttal.
Chairman, thanks for your patience. And I guess there's 3 or 4 items of dispute, which I think we'll try and take you through piece by piece. First of all, with regard to the wetlands, This application was taken through a full wetlands process. The building has been modified in the course. The project was approved about a year ago through wetlands, a detailed wetlands hearing. We worked very closely with the wetlands staff. At one point, what had happened was, as if I can remind everybody, that the staff had requested, because of the poor condition of the pump station along Jefferson Street, and in fact, I don't think the one that they designed will even accommodate all the flow. They asked if we would please, to limit the impact of off-site disturbance, to pursue getting WPCA approval in Bridgeport, so that we would take all of our sanitary material to Bridgeport. We have received that approval. It is part of your record. The wetlands appreciated that modified plan. They looked at the size of the building. We then came to you for a approval to get some text amendments. This commission denied those text amendments. Therefore, the modified plan never really got there. The commission, we submitted a modified plan pursuant to an 8-30G. That was referred to the Wetlands Department. The Wetlands Department made a determination on June 21st in writing that there was not a material change to the plan that had been approved. They looked at it as a modification of the plan, said very specifically that the vertical changes to the proposed structures, not any changes to the proposed footprint or areas of impervious surface. As such, the proposal is a de minimis change and does not create any additional impacts to the wetlands and will not require modification from the Inland Wetlands Agency. That was staff approval, which I believe was then run by the chairman and then put in writing to Mr. Wendt on June 21st.
The chairman meeting the chairman of the Conservation Commission.
Chairman of Conservation. That's my understanding. I think Mr. Wendt might know more about that than I do. But when we originally submitted the 8-30G, it was sent over there for referral. And this is really no different than a situation where if we applied
speaking, please your line.
Stories. Excuse me?
I'm asking everyone on the call if they're not speaking to mute their line.
Okay, sorry. So this would really be no difference than if we came to this commission, and if we're a 7-story application and you approve 5, we wouldn't have to go back to wetlands for a modification. And wetlands would look at that at your approval and make the decision. I think that once again, there was no change in the footprint. Everything was de minimis, but had no impact on wetlands. It would not require another complete application. So I feel very comfortable moving forward with our application, and also in effect that there has been notice. We're very comfortable with the way the town has treated this application. We've made very clear that we've worked with both departments throughout this entire process. What I'd like to do next is call Mr. Bertula, because I'm frankly offended by Mr. Trinkus's statement that both the town engineer, who has reviewed this application twice, and Mr. Bertula just winged this thing. This is a very sensitive application that has been treated as such. We have also then addressed all of Mr. Trinkus's comments. But if I can have Mr. Bertula just take you briefly through the drainage plan that has been submitted to you, which has been approved by Mr. Trinkus. Then we'll move on to height, we'll move on to traffic, and then I'll get out of your way by 10 o'clock, I promise you.
Members of the commission, Mr. Chairman, could you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Again, it's my opinion that this stormwater system will work. As in many projects that I've done in town, along with the engineering department, we do the test holes if and when the project gets approved. This particular project, again, if and when it gets approved, we'll do the soil testing and it'll be sent to the state of Connecticut Highway Department. They'll review it and we'll have to get their approvals also. I thought I took all the precautions that I could. The engineering department through Laura Pooley requested us to put some dry wells along the drainage system, which I did. I put them on the higher part of the system. If the soil turns out to be concrete, as Mr. Trinkus says, I could slide them down into the fill that's proposed on the west side or the left side as you read the map. Again, it's my opinion that the system will work, and it's been reviewed by your engineering department, and it'll be inspected and reviewed by Connecticut DOT. That's it.
Yes, Chairman, one of the things that is important is not only your town engineer, but move through for this process and hopefully have an approval of this application, the plans that have been very carefully reviewed, modified by your engineering department through multiple code enforcement hearings, and by your wetlands department, that this will also go through a third check at the state of Connecticut, since we abut the state of Connecticut. So Mr. Trinkus's concerns that we would dump water into the state of Connecticut wetlands will certainly be thoroughly reviewed by the state engineers to make sure that their interests are protected before any building permit will be issued. Next, although I'm happy to see Mr. Green didn't bring that into question, given the fact that this property is going to be accessed by a light. There's no sightline issues. We took care of all the fire department issues with regard to providing a mountable curb so that the fire engines can get in. Fire department has passed on this. Police department has passed on this. Code enforcement we went through. There's been no problems with regard to engineering, with regard to sight lines. The neighbors did bring into question some issues with perceived issues with regard to traffic. I do have Mr. Galante to just give you a short summary of his findings, why this is safe, and why there is no risk to the public health and safety from the interior circulation or the access, ingress and egress to and from the site. And I'd like to have Mr. Galante address those issues now. I think Ms. Rooney had wrote a lengthy, email about how I know she's not a traffic engineer, why Mr. Galante's traffic report was not accurate. Mr. Galante is very well respected throughout the state and by this commission. I'd like to have him just summarize for the commission and state on the record that there will be no adverse impact to the health or risk to the health, safety, and welfare of anybody with regard to this development. Mike, if I can turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mike Galante, Hardesty in Hanover. I'll be brief, but I'll just summarize the traffic report we prepared this past spring and the process we went through to bring it through a process to identify impacts, levels of service, site traffic generation, distribution, and so on. The scope of the traffic study followed standards that the town certainly follows, and we followed the Connecticut DOT standards. And keep in mind, this process will go through an OSTA review, which is traffic and drainage. So that's a step that will follow the town process. The traffic study used traffic volumes that we actually counted out there a few years ago. We processed it through the projections to a 2023 condition, following standards that the state will review and approve. They've already looked at the planning process of bringing those numbers through a process into a future condition. A development of this type and size, 120 units, will generate 43 and 53 vehicle trip ends during a weekday morning and weekday afternoon peak hour. We added our traffic in a future design year on top of the highest volumes counted at these intersections. And the intersections that we selected using the analysis were, of course, the side driveway at Park Avenue opposite I'll call it the northbound ramp to the Parkway, which is a signalized intersection, as mentioned. The coordination of the traffic signal to the south, which is at the hospital, works in conjunction with that traffic signal. So, of course, we analyzed that intersection. And to the north or upstream of the proposed driveway and the intersection, we analyzed the roundabout at the southbound ramps to the Parkway. So we have intersection to the north and to the south and the side driveway. In the eyes of the state, we would have really only had to count and analyze the driveway intersection opposite the ramps for northbound movements on the Parkway. But we always go one to the north and one to the south in order to balance things out and evaluate traffic conditions for existing and future conditions. There was a concern about traffic added to Jefferson Street, and even though we didn't analyze Jefferson Street in detail, we know what the traffic conditions are on that road. And based on our distribution patterns for the site traffic, about half of our traffic, 45% of our traffic, will travel to and from the Merritt Parkway, not all in one direction, but almost evenly split northbound and southbound. So about half of that traffic will remain on local roads, mostly to the south on Park Avenue, south of the Jefferson Street intersection, Old Town Road into Bridgeport, and Jefferson Street into other parts of Fairfield. Jefferson Street will have about 4 to 6 vehicles added to it from this development in the weekday morning and weekday afternoon peak hours. The 6 vehicles is the afternoon peak hour. And analyzing potential impacts to the intersections, we always do capacity analyses, levels of service, which is a requirement at this point in time, both with the town and with Connecticut DOT and OSTA. We will maintain levels of service at the 2 signalized intersections and the roundabout, which is a different analysis and different model. But we maintain levels of service. In this case, it's overall B for each of those intersections. To look at individual movements at the intersections, is anywhere from A to C during the peak hours with basically no change. I think one location goes from a B to a C at the side driveway. The existing traffic signal timing plans would remain in place. Of course, we would provide traffic signal heads to our driveway with detection, meaning if no one's at the driveway exiting, the light would not go green, although the ramps would really dictate when the traffic signal would go green at the intersection facing the side driveway itself. In the end, minimal impact. There's always an impact of some type. There's no such thing as no impact, but there's minimal impact. We maintain levels of service. And from a safety perspective, as mentioned, it's a signalized intersection. In the end, we have to have a review by Connecticut DOT and OSTA for the traffic signal, the intersections, and not under my jurisdiction, but through our office as far as the OSTA process drainage. And that's a summary of a fairly detailed traffic report that was prepared a few months ago. And I can certainly answer any questions if there's any during tonight's process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any members of the commission have any questions for Mr. Blonde? No. Attorney Rizzio?
Yeah, next, let's talk about the other major issue, which appears to be height. This building, first of all, is 310 feet from the nearest closest residential property line on Weeping Willow. I mean, this project will absolutely through a very heavily wooded, and which will now be an area that is going to have significant drainage and plantings throughout the back. So it's over 300, the building's over 300 feet from the nearest residential property line. Probably about a half a mile around to where Weeping Willow is entered, which is the closest residential neighborhood. We're bordered by the Bridgeport Roman Catholic Diocese, who has no objection to this application. We have football fields or soccer fields directly behind us. We have a baseball field directly behind us. And we're across the street from a church and one of the largest medical complexes in Fairfield County. That project was approved in the last 7 years. Has about 225,000 square feet of building, and one of the new buildings, which is on the Merritt Parkway, right next to the exit, is over about 75 feet high. I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. One of these drawings Mr. Green showed, it was really important to me because I know the commission asked for some pictures, and if you can recall, I took my life into my hands and ran down the side of the bank. There's about a 40-foot grade difference from our property down to the road. And the road here is very narrow. There are 2 lanes each way. There is literally, I mean, I was trying to take pictures on a little side lane, breakdown lane. There's nothing there. I mean, so this is probably the narrowest part of the parkway, and it will stay narrow because of the bridges. And so this section of the parkway sits basically in a valley that's maybe 50 feet wide, 60 feet wide. That's a 40-foot drop in grade. If you look at let's see the side picture, Chris, the cut sheet showing what Mr. Green shows today. And this is one of the reasons we don't believe this is going to have any impact on the view, given in fact, even the fact that it's parking over 6 stories. You look at those trees, which are very mature. It took me, I can't tell you how long to get down there. And then you would have to be driving by at 60 to 70 miles an hour. You can't, if you look at the angle from where the cars are down on the Merritt up, there is no way somebody sitting in their car is going to see that building. The angle doesn't permit you to do it. The trees run right up to the parkway. Trees can't be more than 15 to 20 feet off the property on probably on the steepest slope that I've seen. Chris, I took a picture of that. Let's just show. So this, whether this is 4 stories, 6 stories, or 8 stories, you're not going to see it from the parkway. Give me a second if we can screen share with Chris. I have a couple pictures to take you through. Then I want to take you up the parkway to show you all these other large buildings. So that's me on the side of the parkway looking up to the property. There is no possible way that you're going to see through these trees, given these angles, given the fact some of these trees, a lot of these trees are up to 50 feet high. And then literally, as you saw in that previous picture, there's a 15 to 20 foot drop directly across. So that's what you're looking at. Now tell me how any of those cars going at 65 to 70 miles an hour are going to see a building that's 2 stories high, 4 stories high, 6 stories high. They're not going to see it.
Attorney Rizzio?
Yes.
Attorney Rizzio?
Yes.
Those don't look like pine trees, though. They look like leaves are going to fall.
It's still, there are a bunch of pine trees in there. They're not all pine trees along the side, but I can tell you there's a bunch of pine trees as you can see them within the right of it. You got to remember, there's over 100, almost 200 feet from the building down to the pavement of the parkway. It's probably another 150 feet. It's probably one of the biggest buffers you have on any residential application that you have in front of you. If we go,
Where is that?
so
This is the, you're on, where are you on? The, what, the overpass?
I'm taking that picture from the bridge. Previous picture was from, where you see where that red car, where the red car is? I was in the area between the red car and the other car that's in the middle lane.
But you are currently on Route 59, right? Or is it 58?
I'm currently on, yeah, Park Avenue there.
Oh, Park Avenue. I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong spot. Okay.
You'll never see it from 58. I can promise you that. I'll state that for the record.
Yeah, that's true. I'll grant you that.
So let me take you down a portion of the Merritt. Now, directly across the street.
Hold on. I mean, to be fair, though, in the winter time, is your position is not going to be seen?
In the winter time, what?
Will the building be seen in the winter time?
Possibly through some, possibly through some screen, but not as one big block. It's going to, I mean, that the foliage is so, the trees that are in there are so heavy. And the nice thing about it, you don't have to worry about an applicant, a private owner. That's all owned by the state of Connecticut. That's going to go untouched. The only people that will expose this building to the state, to the public will be the state of Connecticut.
I seem to recall a picture, though, maybe from Attorney Green, that showed a little different as far as density goes. I guess I'm going to have to go out there and take a look myself.
I suggest you take a ride by and even try and take a walk down. But I wouldn't suggest to do it for safety purposes. Now, if you look right across the way on Park Avenue, that is the building that I can see from almost the street, from almost the parkway, which has none of the foliage. It's much closer to the parkway, and that building's about 75 feet high. We had no opposition from the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. And the building, if you go, Chris, let's go to the GIS. If you look at it, it sits right on the exit.
I'm sorry, what building was that again?
The medical center across the street, which sits right on the parkway. It's been there forever. So let's go to Park Avenue there. So the reason that you can see how close that building is to the entrance. And additionally, you have the new section, which is right behind it, which is about 75 feet high. Now, if you move up the Merritt, it's between basically Main Street and Park Avenue, Mall, which clear right up to the parkway, And now they're about to put 250 units or 200 units right off Walburn Avenue there, which has been approved by the town of Trumbull. And then if you continue further down, you've got all the stuff right. You've got another 4 to 5 story building built right on the parkway there off of Lindemann Drive. Then you have a bunch of other industrial buildings, and you move just to the other side. We don't need to go up there. You've all driven by the Marriott 100 times, 1,000 times. And many times you've been on the Marriott, it sits right there. You go in the other direction, all the way down to Black Rock Turnpike. Commission granted basically approved a 60-story 60-foot building that you were going to face as you drive down right into Black Rock Turnpike, coming down the hill at the base of the hill with really no landscaping at all to protect it, no ridge to hide it, and the high hub. So this
Attorney Rizzo, I'm sorry, Attorney Rizzo, is your argument that you're not going to see this particular building that you're proposing from the Merit, or is the argument that you see all these buildings and it doesn't matter?
I'm going to say that it does not have a negative historical impact on just like any of these other buildings, which have not been opposed by the Conservancy, maybe just the one on Black Rock Turnpike. It's not going to have any negative impact on the historical attributes or assets that the Merritt Parkway provides. I think it's about as well protected as any structure and as well buffered as any structure that's been built along the parkway in a commercial nature. And you don't even have to go down to Norwalk and see what you see there. So this has basically almost 150 feet of buffering from the pavement on a 40-foot drop from the pavement to where the building will be, of which it won't be touched because it's controlled by the state of Connecticut. So all I'm saying is that this is probably one of the most protected areas and will remain one of the most protected areas. And because of the unique topography and the amount of landscaping that currently exists, we don't believe this will have any negative impact on the historical value of the Merritt Parkway, and certainly nothing that would override the demand for affordable housing that has been greatly lacking in our community. I also want to point out, as you know, we made sure that this property was well parked. We made sure that we have sidewalks that will connect to Sacred Heart University. I was really offended by Bethel Rooney's letter, which kind of basically thought that this was going to become student housing. There's no intent. Our intention was, we have the largest medical center across the street. We have the largest employer in the town of Fairfield on the same street, on the same side of the road. This is great workforce housing. It's affordable housing that is needed by the community. And it's something that we don't believe currently exists in town, and certainly in this part of town, in this location. It also doesn't have any negative impacts on any residential neighborhoods. This is about as well protected, well buffered from any of the residential neighborhoods. There will be no traffic through those neighborhoods. It is directly across from the Merritt Parkway. People who commute will be able to get on the parkway. People who work basically will be able to walk across the street if they work at Sacred Heart, work down the street if they work at Sacred Heart, walk across the street if they happen to be the nurses, the doctors, the residents, and all the people that work for Yale New Haven across the street, which I believe the owner across the street also supports this application. Housing is a very important need in this area. This type of housing doesn't exist on this side of Fairfield, and we believe this is the appropriate place for it, given the fact that it's not breaking up or in the center of any of your residential neighborhoods. It sits on a major collector road, Park Avenue, a state highway, basically, and abuts a state highway and abuts Bridgeport Diocese land. So for all those reasons, we respectfully believe that this application should be approved. When you look at section 8-30G, section B2G, it specifically states the burden shall be on the commission to prove based on the evidence in the record compiled before such commission. And in that evidence, we have submitted approval for the sewers, approval by the wetlands, approval by all of your departments, including the fire, police, a safety report, and a traffic light so that we don't have any issues there. shores that will not impact your system. We believe we have given and put evidence in this record that shows that we have satisfied our burden of proof. And the burden of proof is actually on the commission that none of the departments that have approved this application or have stated that this application doesn't have any issues is not accurate. It says this decision is necessary to protect a substantial public interest in health, safety, or other matters which this commission may legally consider. We don't believe that we violate or infringe upon substantial public interest in health, safety, or other matters that this commission may legally consider. We believe that our height issue, whether it's 4 or 6 stories, is no issue at all. As you can see along this corridor, there are equally sized buildings. In fact, this commission approved a building that would be even more conspicuous or more easily sighted than the building that is currently proposed. You would have to find that such public interest clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. The state has set forth that this is a very important need. There is no affordable housing in this area of town. There is a huge workforce that needs to house in this area, on top of the fact of the ability for people to easily commute to other towns from this spot. And such public interest cannot be protected by reasonable changes of the affordable housing bill. I don't believe there's anything that needs to be changed. We've satisfied all your concerns of your police department, your engineering department, your fire department. We have adequate parking. I think of all the affordable housing applications that have been before you, this probably has the highest ratio of parking, where we have 1.591 spaces per unit, and we have over 1 space per bedroom. So for all of these reasons, we would respectfully request this commission grant our application. We don't believe that there is any impact on the public interest in health, safety, or other matters, and we think that the record that we've supplied you and put forth before you supports that position. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your patience, and that's my rebuttal to what has been presented tonight and previously.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Last call for questions from the commission. Commissioner Braun.
I have a question for Attorney Rizzio. I finally got a chance to compare this plan with the old plan that you originally submitted. And I'm looking at page 42 of the current plan, which is the right side north elevation plan. And I'm kind of looking at it, comparing it to page 50 of the old plan for 5545 Park Avenue, the right side north elevation plan. So I'm looking at page 42 of the new master set of plans and the page 50 of the old one. And what it shows is the sort of cross section of the building. On the left, I believe, is Park Avenue. On the right, I believe, is like towards Willow down there. And so you're looking at it as if you're looking from the Merritt Parkway. If you could just confirm I'm describing the angle the right way. If you're looking at the right side north elevation plan, that would be looking from the vantage point of the Merritt Parkway, correct? Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at on the new one. And I'm looking at the old one also, but you don't have to pull that up if you can't. But so is that the vantage point of looking from the Merritt Parkway? I don't know if anyone's talking. I can't hear anyone.
No, no one's answering you yet.
Okay.
Sorry, Ray, you need to.
Attorney Rizzio, you're on mute.
Oh, good.
Attorney Rizzio, did you have a question? Apparently.
So am I describing the vantage point correctly, that you're looking at the side of the building as if you were coming from the Merritt Parkway, sort of looking along the length of the building?
Correct.
Okay, so now.
That application, that would be the north side of the.
Okay, thank you. So the building's around 323 feet wide or long or whatever. I'm looking at the bottom part,
Right.
okay, where there's like a dotted line is going across the bottom. Is that where you're going to extend the parking that you described?
Yes.
before? Okay, so you didn't really fill it in, but is it going to go sort of like horizontally across the bottom like that?
Yes, it'll be, yes. So
So-
the parking will all fill in that way.
Yeah, so the bottommost long horizontal line that crosses the whole length of the plan, that's where the parking is going to be extended from the right to the left. In other words, towards Park Avenue.
Correct.
Okay.
The parking was extended further under the building. What basically went from further under the building, so that it used to finish about halfway, and now it's about 2/3 of the way under the building.
I thought it was all the way to the end of the building. So the parking used to go basically to the elevator from the right side to the left. Now it's going to go beyond the elevator all the way to the front of the building, right? Park Avenue end of the building?
Correct. What you would see from the outside is about probably 3/4 of the building. So as you can see, the way the building wraps toward the front, that's, we posted, the building wraps the parking in the front.
I'm actually talking about the subsurface excavation that you'll be doing. So you'll be
Okay.
deeper into the hill to the left than you would have had to before?
Not really. Michael Bertula can answer that question, but not really. I think the way Mr. Geddes designed the building so that it rides the grade. There is a extremely significant drop from Park Avenue down.
Yes. Well, how are you adding all those spaces if you're not going to dig into the hillside underneath the building more than you were to begin with in the old plan? You have to dig more into the hillside to create the parking area underneath the building, right? Than you were before.
John?
That's a question.
John?
Let's see.
Come on.
He's there.
Am I on?
Yes.
All right. Basically, Commissioner, she's correct in the sense that previously, the reason why the parking wasn't being extended under the building was because there wasn't a need for it. So there is a tremendous grade drop from Park Avenue down. So there is going to be cuts and fills. There will be filling that will take place in front of the building and on the right side of the building. That's the reason why you see the retaining wall. So there'll be cuts and fills to neutralize. There's the way that this is set up. There's most of the cuts and fills even out, and most of the material stays on site. So the parking garage portion of it, which was being questioned, is being expended.
So if you look at page 42 of the new plans, which is the right side elevation, I think it shows the parking lot in sort of dark green on the right side of the elevator. But I don't know if it really shows where the new parking is going to go on the left side of the elevator, meaning from midway down the length of the building towards Park Avenue.
Well, the surface parking,
Pardon me?
parking on both sides of the building never changed. The grade that had been established from the first submission stayed the same. The only thing that changed was the garage itself was extended to add the additional parking. But on the outside of the building, nothing changed.
But can you point out where the parking is going to be on page 42? The new parking that you're adding.
Well, the new parking is just as I said, the expansion of that underground garage.
I don't see where it shows up on this. I'm just trying to figure out where it is.
Drawing,
I'll have Chris share. Emmeline, if you can let Chris share. And keep in mind, this was what the impervious has not increased. This would have either just been foundation now that it's parking. There's
I
no
understand.
difference in the amount of impervious.
I'm just trying to figure out from the cross-section
Can
shown
you
on
see it
page
now, Commissioner?
42. On page 42 of your new plan.
Can you see? Commissioner Braun, can you see it now in front of you?
I don't see what, I'm looking at page 42. I don't know what you're showing. I can't see the page.
Look at this. Can you look at the screen?
Yep. Yeah.
There's the parking plan.
Where's Park Avenue?
Park Avenue is at the right. It would be if you're facing the screen. It's at the right side at the top of the screen.
Mm-hmm. So you added a lot of spaces from where the elevator is to the right side of the screen, going towards the front of the building, correct?
That's correct. The garage was expanded, the underground garage portion.
Right. Can you show where that appears on page 42 of the cross-section plan showing the elevations? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Commissioner, it's that dotted line that you had.
Okay. Can you show where the parking's going to be on this plan? This is the right side elevation.
Basically, the entrance is on the right side of the building. And as you can see, then there's a level line that goes straight across. So the parking inside the building will go from right to left.
Where that horizontal line is, that spans the length of the building?
That's correct.
That was not required to be dug out in the original plan because you didn't need that parking in the original plan.
That's correct.
So is the building going to be like stepped up in the original plan with less need for excavation, I assume?
Well, the original plan, as I said, because there was no need, the parking garage stopped halfway down. If you see where that red, the sort of brick colored in the middle of the building, the garage stopped at that point.
Okay. So the excavation has been increased. I think you already said this last time. From the first plan you submitted to this plan, there's more excavation into the hillside. That's what I'm trying to confirm.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. So that to me is a change. Would require wetlands. I'm very concerned about the lack of a wetlands permit because standard condition number 7 says any change in the approved plans must be approved by the Inland Wetlands Agency. The Wetlands Agency has not approved, at least there are changes in the plans, maybe not the footprint, but the agency has not approved this change in plans. And to me, having like, 150 by 70 by whatever the height is of excavation is a lot of cubic feet of extra digging. And also the last time you mentioned there was no subsurface geological survey. So I don't know what happens underneath there when you add to the excavation. It seems to me the Wetlands Agency should probably look at that and, determine if it is the same or if it requires some kind of modification.
Commissioner Braun, if you read the note of June 21st.
I know.
Sarah Nesky, Wetlands Compliance Officer, who went through it and they also have the ability to do over-the-counter agency decisions. There is no change of the impervious surface from what they approved previously. Mm-hmm. That would have been excavated also and would have been foundation. Maybe it wouldn't be as deep, but it would not have any impact. And that's with your own professionals, does not create any additional impacts on the wetlands, which would require for the permit to be modified. These plans were submitted to the Wetlands Agency. These plans were reviewed by the Wetlands Office, not only referred by that, but then also given a written opinion so that it was evidence in this application on June 21st that this had been reviewed by their office, it had been considered, and a determination was made that no additional impacts to wetlands were made, and it did not require a modification to be filed. No different than if we had applied originally for an 8-story building, had that approved by wetlands, decided to reduce it to 6, the Wetlands Commission would look at that and say, you know what? No impact. Many times, decisions, the application that gets modified along the way, this commission makes modifications to plans. that the wetlands then has to make a determination whether that modification is significant or not. And
I hear
in this
everything you're
instance,
saying.
it
Yeah.
went through the process.
I think we've,
Yeah, we've,
beat this one. Unless you have some further questions about the plans and the facts in the application, I think we need to move on. Commissioner Braun, are you
yeah,
finished?
I hear you. That's a decision that we'll have to come to, whether or not there is a permit and whether or not we care if there's a permit.
Correct. Thank you. Any other commissioners have any other questions for Attorney Rizzio? I don't see any hands and nobody is saying anything. All right. Very well. Very well.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, commissioners, for your patience. I know this has been over 2 or 3 go-rounds. I also like to make a note that this was not ever determined to be any kind of which was people label as a spite application. We have greatest respect for this
Attorney
commission.
Rizzio,
I just wanted to make sure because that's been thrown out there and put in the record, and I'm sorry about that. But my client has designed a lot of applications. I've appeared before this commission on a lot of applications. And it's just, in this instance, it was our judgment and the ability to go for the affordable housing that we think is needed. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will close the public hearing on this item, and that's the last item on our agenda. I will adjourn the meeting. Oh,
Just before we leave, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
If I can, I'm sorry, I was having technical difficulties earlier when we were talking about potential scheduling. I've talked to 6 commissioners today. I just need to confirm with a couple commissioners tonight, if I may, as to their availability on both the 10th and 24th of August. I don't have, Commissioner Braun is one who I didn't speak to today. I was just, in an earlier email, you didn't have any plans, but I just need to confirm if you're available on the 10th and the 24th.
Yes, I'm available at present on both dates.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bremen, I also had a question. You had indicated prior that you were not available on the 10th, but are available on the 24th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And lastly, I just need to confirm with Mr. Noonan, who I was confused about his schedule. Is he still here? I don't see him. I can connect with him tomorrow. Okay. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there no longer public opinion?
The hearing in this matter has been closed. We just spent the last over an hour, and I made several calls for public comment. We just spent the last 30 or 40 minutes on the rebuttal.
Yeah, technology, it doesn't always work to 100%, but okay.
All right. And the meetings have been adjourned. We were just, Mr. Wendt was just asking about availability for future meetings. Okay.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.